Hello, wonderful people. Welcome to Dark Harry, your story destination. We have an absolute treat for you today. What if Harry refused to fight Voldemort and left Britain forever? Dumbledore Pansatisfied. If you're enjoying these stories, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support keeps the stories coming. With that said, let the adventure begin. Chapter 1, The Breaking Point. The cupboard under the stairs had never looked so inviting. Harry Potter sat on his bed at number 4 Privet Drive, staring at the ceiling as memories of Sirius falling through the veil played on repeat. 3 weeks since that night at the Department of Mysteries, and sleep remained his enemy. "Boy! Are you deaf?" Uncle Vernon's voice boomed from downstairs. The posts arrived. Harry didn't move. What was the point? Another day of the Daily Prophet calling him the chosen one, another letter from Ron or Hermione telling him not to blame himself, another cryptic note from Dumbledore instructing him to stay put. His life had become a broken record of other people's expectations. He finally rolled off the bed when he heard his uncle's heavy footsteps on the stairs. Better to avoid another confrontation. Harry grabbed the letters from the doormat, bill, advertisement, and a thick envelope addressed to him in unfamiliar handwriting. Back in his room, Harry examined the envelope. The parchment was cream-colored and heavyweight, with a wax seal bearing an intricate G pressed into it. Gringotts. Harry broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. "Mr. Potter, it has come to our attention that you have reached the age where certain financial disclosures are required by Goblin banking law. Your account manager, Griphook, requests your presence at your earliest convenience regarding irregularities in your family vaults and various asset allocations authorized by your magical guardian. As this is a matter of some urgency, we have taken the liberty of arranging secure transportation for tomorrow at 10 a.m. Simply touch the enclosed token at the designated time. May your gold flow and your enemies tremble, Ragnarok, Director of Client Inheritance, Gringotts Wizarding Bank." Harry turned the envelope over and a small golden coin fell into his palm. Irregularities? Asset allocations? Harry had barely given a thought to his finances beyond his trust vault. The letter mentioned family vaults, plural, suggesting there was more to his inheritance than he knew. His magical guardian would be Dumbledore. The same Dumbledore who'd dumped a prophecy on him after Sirius died, explaining why his parents were murdered and why he had no choice but to eventually kill or be killed by Voldemort. The same Dumbledore who'd kept him in the dark for years. Enough, Harry whispered to himself, pocketing the token. Enough secrets. Sleep came easier that night, knowing he was finally taking action instead of waiting for permission. The portkey deposited Harry in a small, richly appointed room within Gringotts. His stomach lurched from the magical transportation, but he managed to stay on his feet, a small victory. "Mr. Potter, prompt as requested." A goblin with a particularly long nose and steel-gray hair stood from behind a desk inlaid with gold. "I am Ragnarok. Please be seated." Harry sat in the ornate chair across from the goblin. "Your letter mentioned irregularities." "Direct." "Good." Ragnarok snapped his fingers, and a thick folder materialized on the desk. "We've been attempting to contact you for some time. Our owls were redirected." "Redirected? By who?" "Your magical guardian, Albus Dumbledore." Ragnarok's tone remained neutral, but his sharp teeth gleamed as he spoke the headmaster's name. "He assured us he was conveying all financial information to you personally. He never mentioned anything about my family's money beyond my trust vault." Ragnarok's eyebrows rose slightly. "I see. Then you are unaware that you are the sole heir to the Potter family fortune, which includes not only substantial gold reserves but also properties in 7 countries, investment portfolios in both magical and muggle ventures, and several business interests." Harry's mouth went dry. 7 countries. Indeed. Britain, France, Switzerland, Italy, Spain, the United States, and Japan. Your grandfather was quite the international investor. And Dumbledore knew about all this? As your magical guardian, he has had oversight of these assets since your parents' death. While he cannot access the main family vaults, he has authority to manage the investments and properties until you reach majority. Harry's hands clenched into fists beneath the desk. Has he been managing them well? That depends on your perspective. Financially, yes. The Potter wealth has grown modestly under his stewardship. However, Ragnarok paused, studying Harry carefully. Several properties have been made unplottable and placed under Fidelius charms with Dumbledore as secret keeper. Others have been leased to various organizations, including one called the Order of the Phoenix. He's been using my family's houses for the Order without telling me. Heat rose in Harry's chest. What else hasn't he told me? That's precisely what concerned us, Mr. Potter. According to our records, you should have been informed of your full inheritance at 13. When our notifications went unanswered, we were obligated to wait until your 16th birthday, which approaches, before initiating direct contact. What about the Ministry? Do they know about all this? The Ministry is aware of your British holdings only. International assets fall outside their jurisdiction. Ragnarok leaned forward. Which brings me to another matter. The British Ministry has recently made inquiries about establishing a trust in your name, the Chosen One Victory Fund, with your enthusiastic approval. What? I never approved anything like that. As we suspected. The paperwork bore your magical signature, but our authentication spells detected coercion. Harry's mind raced. Someone at the Ministry had forged or manipulated his magical signature. After everything that happened at the Department of Mysteries, after the Prophet finally admitted Voldemort was back, they were still trying to control him. Mr. Ragnarok, I need to know everything. About my inheritance, my rights, and especially my options outside Britain. The goblin's expression remained impassive, but Harry thought he detected a glint of approval in those dark eyes. Very well, Mr. Potter. First, you should know that while British wizarding law requires you to be 17 to claim your full inheritance, the Potter family has special dispensations in France and Switzerland allowing claim at 16 through a ritual of magical maturity. What does that entail? A simple ceremony verifying your magical independence. Once completed, you would have full control of all Potter assets, regardless of British Ministry restrictions. And I could access my family's properties abroad? Live there if I wanted? Certainly. Though I must caution you, leaving Britain under current circumstances would cause significant reactions. Harry thought of the prophecy, of Dumbledore's insistence that he alone could vanquish Voldemort. He thought of Sirius falling through the veil, of Cedric's empty eyes, of the years of manipulation and half-truths. Mr. Ragnarok, I'd like to schedule this ritual as soon as possible. The goblin's mouth curved into what might have been a smile. As it happens, Mr. Potter, we have a ritual chamber available this afternoon. Shall we proceed with the necessary paperwork? For the first time since that night at the Ministry, Harry felt something like hope stirring in his chest. 4 hours later, Harry emerged from the ritual chamber feeling lighter than he had in months. The magic had been intense but strangely affirming, as if parts of himself long suppressed were finally awakening. Ragnarok had explained that the Potter family magic recognized him not just by blood but by character and intent. Congratulations, Mr. Potter. You are now legally recognized as an adult in France, Switzerland, and by extension, the International Confederation of Wizards. The goblin handed him a silver key ring holding 7 ornate keys. These will access all your properties. Each is also a portkey activated by the phrase, Sanctuary, followed by the country name. Thank you, Ragnarok. For everything. Harry pocketed the keys. There's one more thing I need to discuss. I'm planning to leave Britain, soon, and I don't want anyone tracking me. A wise precaution. Gringotts offers several options for those seeking privacy. For a modest fee, we can provide unplottable travel arrangements and identity concealment charms. I'll take whatever you recommend. Excellent. I suggest our Platinum Privacy Package. It includes untraceable international port keys, magical signature dampening, and correspondence redirection. Ragnarok scratched something on a piece of parchment. We can also provide Muggle documentation for each country where you hold property. Perfect. How soon can I leave? The preparations will take approximately 3 days. In the meantime, I recommend discretion regarding your plans. Harry nodded, already thinking about what he needed to do. He couldn't just vanish without a word, but he also couldn't risk Dumbledore or the Ministry stopping him. I have a few friends I need to talk to before I go. Can you guarantee their letters will reach me if I leave the country? Certainly. Simply provide their names, and we'll ensure their correspondence finds you regardless of protective enchantments. Harry left Gringotts with a clear plan forming in his mind. First, he needed to gather his belongings from Privet Drive without alerting the Order members watching the house. Then he needed to speak with his closest friends, they deserved to hear his decision directly from him. Finally, he needed to prepare for a life outside Britain, beyond the shadow of prophecy and Voldemort's obsession. For the first time since he'd entered the wizarding world, Harry felt he was making a choice entirely his own. Retrieving his belongings proved surprisingly easy. The Order member on duty was Mundungus Fletcher, who was more interested in his smuggled cauldrons than watching Harry's window. A disillusionment charm, one of the few useful spells he'd learned during DA meetings, allowed Harry to slip out unnoticed with his trunk in Hedwig's cage. The night bus deposited him near the burrow just after sunset. He'd considered writing to Ron and Hermione, but some conversations needed to happen face to face. According to Ron's last letter, Hermione was staying with the Weasleys for the week before they all moved to Grimmauld Place. Harry approached the crooked house with a knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach. Lights glowed warmly in the windows, and the smell of Mrs. Weasley's cooking wafted through the summer air. For a moment, he hesitated. This place had been more of a home to him than Privet Drive ever was. But homes shouldn't come with prophesied deaths attached. He knocked on the door, and moments later it flew open to reveal Mrs. Weasley, whose shocked expression quickly morphed into concern. "Harry! What are you doing here? It's not safe, you shouldn't have left your aunt and uncles without an escort." She pulled him inside nonetheless, enveloping him in a bone-crushing hug before holding him at arm's length to examine him. "You're too thin, as usual. Are you hungry? We've just finished dinner, but I can easily warm up a plate." "That would be great, Mrs. Weasley." "Thanks." Harry followed her into the kitchen, where several redheads and one bushy-haired figure looked up in surprise. "Harry!" Hermione jumped from her seat and rushed to hug him. "What are you doing here? Is everything all right?" "Blimey, mate," said Ron, grinning. "Did Dumbledore finally spring you from prison?" "Not exactly." Harry set his trunk down. "I need to talk to all of you about something important." The atmosphere in the room shifted. "Mr. Weasley lowered his newspaper, Ginny stopped mid-bite, and the twins exchanged glances. "Perhaps after you've eaten," Mrs. Weasley suggested, already placing a heaping plate of shepherd's pie in front of him. Harry shook his head. "Thanks, but this can't wait." "What's happened?" Mr. Weasley asked, his normally jovial face serious. "Has there been another attack?" "No. It's about me. I've made a decision." Harry took a deep breath. "I'm leaving Britain. For good." The stunned silence that followed was broken by multiple voices at once. "You can't be serious. What about you-know-who? Dumbledore would never allow." "Harry, that's completely irresponsible." "Quiet." Harry's voice cut through the chaos. "I didn't come here for permission. I came because you deserve to know from me directly instead of finding out later." "But Harry," Hermione said, her voice unusually small, "what about the prophecy? Dumbledore told the Order it has to be you who defeats Voldemort. Did he tell you what it actually says?" Hermione shook her head. "It says either must die at the hand of the other. That's the key part, either must die at the hand of the other. If I'm not here, if I'm not fighting him, then neither of us has to die. That's not how prophecies work, Harry, Mr. Weasley said gently. You can't just walk away from fate. Watch me. Harry's green eyes flashed. I didn't ask for any of this. Not the scar, not the fame, not the responsibility of defeating the most powerful dark wizard in a century. Everyone's been making choices for me my whole life, where I live, what I know, who I can talk to. Even my own money and family properties have been kept from me. What are you talking about, dear? Mrs. Weasley asked, her brow furrowed. Did you know my family owns houses in 6 countries outside Britain? That I have enough money to live comfortably for several lifetimes? Because I sure didn't, until Gringotts finally managed to contact me directly. Dumbledore must have had reasons, Hermione began. Dumbledore always has reasons. That doesn't make them right. Harry ran a hand through his messy hair. Look, I'm not abandoning you all. I'm just choosing a different way to fight. One where I'm not a weapon or a symbol or a sacrifice waiting to happen. You're running away, Ron said flatly. The hurt in his voice cut deeper than anger would have. If that's how you see it. How else should I see it? You know who is here, killing people, and you're just going to what, live it up in some fancy Potter mansion abroad while the rest of us deal with him? Ron, Hermione warned, but Harry shook his head. It's fine. I expected this reaction. Harry met Ron's accusing gaze. I've faced Voldemort 5 times now. I've watched Cedric and Sirius die because of this connection between us. I've been possessed, tortured, hunted, and lied to. And now I'm told I have to kill him or be killed, like my whole life has been building to one final duel. Well, I'm done playing by those rules. What about the DA? What about everything we've been training for? Ginny asked. Keep training. Keep fighting in your own way. I'm not saying give up, I'm saying find a different path. One that doesn't end with a 17-year-old martyr. And what makes you think you know who won't follow you? George asked. He's obsessed with you, mate. Let him try. The ICW takes threats to its citizens seriously, especially in countries without recent histories of Dark Lord problems. And I won't be easy to find. Fred leaned forward. You've really thought this through, haven't you? I've had a lot of sleepless nights lately. Harry offered a grim smile. Look, I didn't come here expecting your blessing. I came because I respect you all too much to disappear without a word. When are you leaving? Hermione asked, and something in her tone made Harry look at her more carefully. Her eyes were shining with unshed tears, but there was also a calculating look he recognized from when she was solving a particularly complex problem. 3 days. I have some arrangements to finalize with Gringotts. Mrs. Weasley wiped her eyes with the corner of her apron. Harry, dear, I know this past year has been unimaginably difficult for you. Losing Sirius, learning about this prophecy. But running away isn't the answer. You have people here who love you, who want to protect you. I know that, Mrs. Weasley. And I love all of you too. That's part of why I'm doing this. Every person close to me becomes a target. My parents, Cedric, Sirius. I can't watch any more people die because Voldemort wants to get to me. So noble, Ron muttered. Always have to be the hero, even when you're running away. Harry felt a flash of anger. You think this is easy for me? Leaving the only real home I've ever known. Walking away from Hogwarts, from Quidditch, from... He stopped abruptly, his eyes darting briefly to Ginny before he continued. This is the hardest decision I've ever made. Then don't make it, Ron said. Stay and fight with us. I've given enough. Harry's voice hardened. 15 years of my life living under stairs and in cupboards. 5 years of nearly dying every June like clockwork. I'm choosing something different now. A tense silence fell over the kitchen. Harry hadn't touched his food, his appetite gone. Finally, Mr. Weasley spoke. We can't force you to stay, Harry. Though I think you're making a grave mistake, I respect that this is your decision to make. He looked tired suddenly, older than his years. Whatever you choose, know that you'll always have a place in this family. Thank you, Harry said softly, feeling a lump in his throat. Where will you go first? Hermione asked. Harry hesitated. I probably shouldn't say, even here. Smart, Fred nodded. Walls have ears these days. I can still write to you, Harry offered. Gringotts has ways of forwarding letters that can't be traced. Of course you'll write, Mrs. Weasley said firmly, as if the matter was settled. And you'll eat something before you leave this house, Harry Potter, or I'll follow you across the channel myself. The tension broke slightly as Harry finally picked up his fork. He knew the conversation wasn't over, especially with Ron glaring daggers at him, but at least they weren't trying to stop him. There's one more thing, Harry said between bites. Dumbledore can't know I was here, or what I'm planning. Not until I'm gone. You want us to lie to Dumbledore? Hermione looked scandalized. Not lie. Just, don't volunteer information if he doesn't ask directly. Harry gave her a significant look. You're good at keeping secrets when it matters, Hermione. You kept the Time Turner secret all third year. That was different. That was, just as important to me as this is. Harry set down his fork. Please. I need 3 days. Hermione bit her lip, clearly torn. What happens after you leave? To the Order, to the fight against Voldemort. They keep fighting, just without using me as their secret weapon. Maybe they'll finally start treating this like the war it is instead of putting all their hopes on a teenager with a lightning scar. The prophecy, Ron began. Prophecies are fulfilled in all sorts of unexpected ways, Harry interrupted. Divination's the woolliest branch of magic, remember? Even Dumbledore admits interpretations can vary. Speaking of Dumbledore, Mr. Weasley said carefully, he's scheduled to visit here tomorrow evening. To discuss moving everyone to headquarters for the remainder of the summer. Harry nodded. All the more reason for me to leave tonight. You just got here. Mrs. Weasley protested. And I've said what I needed to say. Harry stood up. I should go before it gets any later. The longer I stay, the more risk of someone from the Order spotting me. Hermione suddenly stood up as well. I need to talk to Harry privately before he leaves. Just for a few minutes. Ron looked betrayed, but before he could object, Hermione was already pulling Harry into the living room. Once they were alone, she cast a quick Muffliato charm at the door, a spell Harry recognized from the Half-Blood Prince's potions book he'd glimpsed her studying. You're planning something, Harry said. So are you, Hermione countered. Look, I don't agree with your decision to leave, but I understand it better than the others. After everything that happened at the Department of Mysteries, after seeing what the prophecy did to you. I get it. But I need to know where you'll be, Harry. Not to tell anyone, I promise, but because I think there's more to this prophecy business than Dumbledore is letting on. Harry studied her carefully. What do you mean? I've been researching prophecies this summer. The Department of Mysteries isn't the only place they're recorded. There are academic papers, historical analyses, and patterns, Harry. Patterns in how prophecies manifest. And I think your interpretation might actually have merit. The wording is crucial, either must die at the hand of the other, could indeed mean that physical separation nullifies the prophecy's power. So you believe me? I believe it's worth investigating further. Which I can't do if I don't know where to send my findings. Harry hesitated, then made a decision. Switzerland first. There's a Potter property in the Alps. After that, probably France or the United States. Hermione nodded. I won't tell anyone. But Harry, be prepared for Dumbledore's reaction. He's not going to just let his prophecy child walk away. I'm not his anything anymore. I hope you're right. She hugged him tightly. Be careful. And for Merlin's sake, keep studying. Just because you're leaving Hogwarts doesn't mean your magical education should stop. Harry laughed despite himself. Only you would be worried about my grades at a time like this. Someone has to be. She stepped back, her expression serious again. I'll help however I can from here. Thanks, Hermione. That means a lot. When they returned to the kitchen, the atmosphere was still tense. Ron refused to look at Harry, while Ginny seemed caught between anger and understanding. The twins, surprisingly, gave Harry identical nods of respect. We respect a good exit strategy, George said. Especially one that gives Dumbledore the runaround, Fred added. Mrs. Weasley looked like she wanted to protest but instead pulled Harry into another bone-crushing hug. Promise you'll be careful. And that you'll eat properly. I promise, Mrs. Weasley. Mr. Weasley shook Harry's hand firmly. You've always shown remarkable judgment for someone your age, Harry. I hope that serves you well in this decision too. When Harry finally left the burrow, the weight on his shoulders felt both heavier and lighter. He'd expected their disapproval, even their anger, but the mixed reactions, particularly Hermione's guarded support, gave him hope that he wasn't making a terrible mistake. As he raised his wand to summon the night bus, Harry glanced back at the crooked, warm house one last time. Part of him wondered if he'd ever see it again. The other part knew it was time to find a new definition of home. Albus Dumbledore arrived at the burrow the following evening to find an unusually subdued Weasley family. Molly's smile seemed forced, Arthur was overly formal, and the youngest two Weasleys barely met his eyes. Only Hermione Granger behaved normally, asking her typical barrage of thoughtful questions about the upcoming relocation to Grimmauld Place. It wasn't until they were halfway through dinner that Dumbledore casually mentioned, I trust Harry is still safely ensconced at his aunt and uncle's. The sudden tension around the table was palpable. As far as we know, Headmaster, Arthur replied carefully. Indeed. Dumbledore's blue eyes twinkled, though his expression remained serious. It's curious, then, that the blood wards at Privet Drive registered a significant fluctuation yesterday, the kind that typically occurs when the protected individual leaves the premises for an extended period. Ron stabbed a potato with unnecessary force. Ginny became intensely interested in her plate. Fred and George exchanged glances. Perhaps, Hermione suggested, the wards are responding to Harry's emotional state. He's been through a terrible trauma, after all. Perhaps, Dumbledore agreed, though his tone suggested skepticism. In any case, I've dispatched Tonks to check on him personally, rather than relying on Mundungus's reports. Mrs. Weasley dropped her fork with a clatter. Mundungus? You left Harry's safety to that unreliable, a decision I'm now reconsidering, Dumbledore interrupted gently. But I'm more interested in why everyone at this table seems to be avoiding a direct answer to my question about Harry's whereabouts. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Hermione finally spoke. Professor, may I ask you something? Of course, Miss Granger. The prophecy about Harry and Voldemort, is there any way to opt out of it? Dumbledore's expression sharpened instantly. What exactly do you mean? I mean, if Harry chose not to confront Voldemort directly, if he removed himself from the equation, so to speak, would the prophecy still bind him? Harry has been here, Dumbledore said, not a question but a statement. And he has told you he intends to leave Britain. No one denied it. Dumbledore closed his eyes briefly, and for a moment he looked every one of his considerable years. When he opened them again, there was something in his expression that none of them had seen before, not anger or disappointment, but a strange sort of satisfaction. I see. And when did Harry share this plan with you? Last night, Arthur admitted. He was quite determined. Did he mention where he intended to go? No, said Ron bitterly. Apparently we don't need to know that. I see, Dumbledore said again. He took a sip of his pumpkin juice, seemingly lost in thought. Aren't you going to stop him? Ginny blurted out. He can't just abandon everyone when Voldemort's getting stronger. My dear Miss Weasley, Dumbledore said gently, Harry Potter has been carrying a burden that would crush most grown wizards since he was 11 years old. If anyone has earned the right to choose his own path, it is he. The table fell silent again, this time in shock. But, the prophecy. Mrs. Weasley stammered. Prophecies, Dumbledore said, his eyes twinkling more brightly now, have a curious way of fulfilling themselves regardless of our attempts to control them. Sometimes, the most direct path is not the one that leads to victory. You're saying you're okay with Harry running away? Ron demanded. I am saying, Mr. Weasley, that Harry's decision may be wiser than any of us realize. Dumbledore dabbed at his mouth with a napkin and rose from the table. Now, I believe I should pay a visit to Gringotts. There are certain financial matters that require my attention. After Dumbledore left, the Weasleys and Hermione stared at each other in confusion. Did that just happen? George asked. Did Dumbledore basically give Harry permission to abandon the fight against you-know-who? Fred added. Something's not right, Hermione murmured, her brow furrowed. He was too calm, too accepting. It's almost as if he expected this. Mr. Weasley finished for her. Or wanted it, Hermione said slowly. But why would Dumbledore want Harry to leave Britain? None of them had an answer, but all of them felt the same unease, that they had just witnessed another move in a game much larger and more complex than they had imagined. Harry was finalizing his preparations at the Leaky Cauldron, where he'd taken a room under a false name, when a knock came at his door. His wand was in his hand instantly. Who is it? Someone who appreciates your newfound independence, came Dumbledore's unmistakable voice. Harry's heart sank. So close to escaping, and now Dumbledore had found him. He considered his options. He could refuse to open the door, try to apparate away, though he hadn't officially learned how yet, or face Dumbledore and hope to reason with him. In the end, his Gryffindor nature won out. Harry opened the door. Dumbledore stood in the hallway, resplendent in midnight blue robes with silver stars that actually twinkled. His expression was serene, with no trace of the anger or disappointment Harry had expected. May I come in, Harry? What I have to say should not be overheard. Harry stepped aside reluctantly, his wand still in his hand. How did you find me? The Leaky Cauldron has always reported unusual guests to me, a precaution from the First War that Tom maintains to this day. Dumbledore entered and took a seat in the room's single chair without waiting for an invitation. You've chosen an interesting path, Harry. I'm not changing my mind. I wouldn't dream of asking you to. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. In fact, I've come to help facilitate your departure. Harry stared at him in disbelief. What? Your plan to leave Britain is actually quite fortuitous. There are aspects of magic, ancient, powerful protections, that can only be activated under certain conditions. One of those conditions is the voluntary exile of a magical nexus point, such as yourself. I don't understand. You wouldn't. Dumbledore's tone wasn't unkind. The magic I speak of isn't taught at Hogwarts or mentioned in any modern text. It dates back to the founding of Britain's magical community, when the first wizarding families established this island as their home. What does that have to do with me leaving? Everything. Dumbledore leaned forward. When a magical bloodline, particularly one as old and powerful as the Potters, chooses to abandon Britain of their own free will, it triggers protective enchantments designed to purge the land of whatever drove them away. Harry's eyes narrowed. If that's true, why didn't you tell me about this before? Why all the talk about prophecies and me having to kill Voldemort? Because the magic requires genuine choice, Harry. If you had left believing it was part of a plan to defeat Voldemort, the protective enchantments would not activate. You had to choose exile for your own reasons, out of frustration, self-preservation, or even anger. That's... Harry struggled to find words. That's manipulative even for you. Perhaps. Dumbledore inclined his head. But manipulation has its place in war, especially when dealing with magic that responds to authentic emotion rather than strategic calculation. So everything, keeping me in the dark about my inheritance, about the prophecy, about my options, was to make me angry enough to leave? Not exactly. Those were genuine mistakes on my part, born from an old man's desire to protect you from burdens no child should bear. Dumbledore's expression grew somber. But when Sirius died, when I saw how deeply the prophecy affected you, I realized there might be another way. One that spared you the direct confrontation the prophecy seemed to demand. Harry sank onto the bed, his mind racing. Could he believe Dumbledore? Was this yet another manipulation, or was there truth to his claims about ancient magic? If I leave, what happens to Voldemort? The protective enchantments will begin to manifest. Slowly at first, subtle disruptions to his magic, difficulty maintaining control over his followers. Then more dramatically, British magical locations becoming hostile to his presence, his connections to British dark magic severing one by one. And the prophecy will be fulfilled, though not as either of us initially interpreted it. Your choice to leave, to refuse the direct confrontation, changes the very nature of the magical conflict. Harry studied Dumbledore's face, looking for signs of deception. Why should I believe you? After everything you've kept from me? You shouldn't, necessarily. Dumbledore smiled sadly. Trust must be earned, and I have done little to earn yours lately. But consider this, I could have prevented your departure in numerous ways. I could have had the Ministry declare you a ward of the state, had your Gringotts access restricted, even placed you under magical house arrest for your protection. Instead, I am here, offering assistance. It was true, Harry realized. Dumbledore had the power and influence to stop him if he truly wanted to. What kind of assistance? He asked cautiously. Information, primarily. About the Potter properties abroad, particularly the protections and magical features your grandfather installed that aren't documented in Gringotts records. And contacts, trustworthy witches and wizards in each country who can help you establish yourself without drawing attention. And in return, regular correspondence. Not your location, Dumbledore added quickly, seeing Harry's expression, but updates on your well-being and any unusual magical phenomena you might experience as the protective enchantments activate. Harry considered the offer. Even if Dumbledore was lying about the ancient magic, having information about his family properties and international contacts could prove invaluable. I want an unbreakable vow, Harry said suddenly. That you won't reveal my location to anyone, or try to bring me back to Britain against my will. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose slightly. That's quite a serious request, Harry. These are serious times. After a moment's consideration, Dumbledore nodded. Very well. Though we'll need a third person to bind the vow. I know someone, Harry said, thinking of the one person who had shown understanding of his decision. Hermione. The unbreakable vow took place that night in Harry's room at the Leaky Cauldron. Hermione arrived looking nervous but determined, her eyes widening when Dumbledore explained what they were about to do. Are you sure about this, Harry? An unbreakable vow is the only way I can trust him, Harry finished. Will you help us? Hermione nodded, drawing her wand with a slightly shaking hand as Harry and Dumbledore knelt facing each other, their right hands clasped. Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, Harry began formally, do you vow not to reveal my location to anyone once I leave Britain, unless I give you explicit permission to do so? A thin tongue of brilliant flame issued from Hermione's wand and wound around their hands like a red-hot wire. I do, Dumbledore said calmly. And do you vow not to attempt to bring me back to Britain against my will, directly or through the actions of others? A second flame shot from the wand and interlinked with the first, making a fine, glowing chain. I do, Dumbledore repeated. And finally, do you vow that everything you've told me about the protective enchantments activated by my voluntary exile is truthful to the best of your knowledge? A third flame twisted with the others, binding their joined hands in a complex knot of light. Dumbledore's blue eyes met Harry's green ones steadily. I do. The fiery bonds glowed blindingly bright for a moment before sinking into their skin and disappearing. The magic of the vow settled around them like a weight. It's done, Hermione whispered. Dumbledore rose to his feet with surprising agility for a man his age. Now, Harry, we have much to discuss about your family properties. The Swiss chalet, in particular, has certain unique features you should be aware of. For the next 2 hours, Dumbledore shared detailed information about each Potter property, the centuries-old villa in Tuscany with its extensive magical gardens, the modern apartment in magical Tokyo with its enchanted windows showing views from around the world, the rustic cabin in Vermont surrounded by forests teeming with magical creatures found nowhere else in North America. But it was the Swiss chalet that sounded most appealing to Harry, remote, heavily warded, and sitting on a convergence of natural magical ley lines that amplified protective enchantments. Your grandfather, Dumbledore explained, was something of a magical theorist. The chalet became his laboratory for experimenting with ancient forms of protective magic, the same kind that I believe will activate when you leave Britain. Did my dad ever live there? Harry asked, hungry as always for connections to his family. Indeed. James spent several summers there as a child, and later brought your mother for their honeymoon. Dumbledore's expression softened at the memory. I believe they intended it to be a refuge if the war with Voldemort became too dangerous, a plan they never had the chance to implement. Harry felt a lump in his throat. He would be following in his parents' footsteps after all, just not in the way anyone had expected. As midnight approached, Dumbledore rose to leave. I've taken the liberty of arranging an international port key that will bypass the Ministry's detection. It's scheduled to activate tomorrow at noon, sufficient time to conclude your business with Gringotts, I believe. Thank you, Harry said, still not entirely sure if he was walking into another of Dumbledore's elaborate plans or genuinely taking control of his own destiny. One last thing, Harry. Dumbledore reached into his robes and withdrew a small, leather-bound journal. This belonged to your father. It contains his notes on the chalet's magical properties and the research he conducted there. I've held it in trust for you, and now seems the appropriate time to return it. Harry took the journal with reverent hands. You've had this all along. One of many items I've preserved for when you were ready. Perhaps I waited too long to share them. Dumbledore sighed. An old man's mistake, thinking he knows best when to parse out information. I'm learning, albeit slowly, that sometimes the direct approach is best. After Dumbledore departed, Hermione lingered, her expression troubled. Harry, are you absolutely certain about this? An unbreakable vow doesn't guarantee Dumbledore isn't still manipulating the situation somehow. I know. Harry carefully placed his father's journal in his trunk. But at this point, I don't see a better option. If Dumbledore's telling the truth about these protective enchantments, my leaving might actually help defeat Voldemort. And if he's lying, well, I'm still getting away from a situation where I'm either a weapon or a target. And if Voldemort follows you? Let him try. According to Gringotts, the international magical community takes a much more aggressive approach to dark wizards than Britain does. Apparently, most countries don't believe in giving second chances to genocidal maniacs. Hermione managed a smile. I've been reading about international magical law. It's fascinating how different the approaches are. The Swiss Magical Confederation, for instance, has maintained neutrality for centuries while simultaneously housing the most secure magical prisons in Europe. Always researching, Harry said fondly. I'm going to miss that. You don't have to. I've been thinking. Hermione hesitated, then squared her shoulders in a way Harry recognized as her making a decision. I want to come with you. What? Not immediately, she clarified. I need to make arrangements, talk to my parents, prepare a reasonable explanation for not returning to Hogwarts. But I can join you in a few weeks. Hermione, I can't ask you to, you're not asking. I'm offering. And before you get all noble about putting me in danger, consider this, I'm a Muggle-born witch in a country where Voldemort's power is growing daily. Statistically speaking, I might be safer with you abroad than at Hogwarts. Harry couldn't argue with that logic. What about Ron? And your education? Ron. Hermione sighed. He wouldn't come even if we asked. His family is here, and he feels very strongly about staying to fight. As for my education, there are excellent magical schools all over Europe. And between your family resources and my research skills, we could probably arrange for private tutoring. The thought of not facing exile alone sent a surge of relief through Harry. If you're sure. I am. Someone needs to make sure you don't spend your exile flying around on that firebolt instead of studying for newts. Harry laughed, feeling lighter than he had in months. Always looking out for me. Someone has to. Hermione hugged him tightly. Be safe until I join you. And Harry. I think Dumbledore might actually be telling the truth about the protective magic. The way he explained it aligns with some obscure references I found in ancient familial bonds and their modern applications. You found a book about this? Not exactly. Just a passing reference to voluntary exile magic. But enough to make me think there's something to his claims. After Hermione left, Harry lay awake for hours, his mind racing with possibilities. Tomorrow he would leave Britain behind, the only home he'd ever known, despite its dangers and disappointments. He would be walking away from the prophecy, from his destined confrontation with Voldemort, from the expectations that had defined his life since he was 11 years old. It should have felt like cowardice. Instead, it felt like the bravest decision he'd ever made. Harry's final meeting at Gringotts the next morning was brief but productive. Ragnarok presented him with an enchanted wallet connected directly to his family vaults, international identification papers for both magical and Muggle authorities, and a secure communication mirror linked to the bank. For emergencies only, the goblin explained. While untraceable to wizards, these mirrors do leave a magical signature that particularly determined individuals might detect. Like Voldemort? Or certain ministry officials with access to goblin-made detection devices. Ragnarok's expression suggested exactly what he thought of wizards possessing such technology. As Harry prepared to leave, the goblin handed him one last item, a simple silver ring with the Potter family crest. This is traditionally given when the heir claims their inheritance. It contains protective enchantments and serves as a key to certain family vaults that cannot be accessed otherwise. Harry slipped the ring onto his right hand and felt a warm tingle as the magic recognized him. Thank you for everything, Ragnarok. The wizarding world could learn a lot from goblin directness. Indeed. The goblin offered a razor-sharp smile. Safe travels, Mr. Potter. May your gold always flow and your enemies tremble before you. At precisely noon, Harry stood in a private room at the Leaky Cauldron, his possessions shrunk and packed in a single enchanted rucksack. The portkey, disguised as an ordinary Swiss Army knife, began to glow blue in his hand. Harry took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his decision. He was leaving behind friends, mentors, the only magical community he'd ever known. He was abandoning the path that had been laid out for him since that fateful Halloween night. But he was also choosing himself for once. Choosing life over martyrdom, freedom over prophecy. The portkey's glow intensified. 3 seconds until activation. Goodbye, Britain, Harry whispered. 2 seconds. He thought of Ron's anger, Dumbledore's mysterious satisfaction, Hermione's promise to join him. 1 second. The image of Sirius falling through the veil flashed through his mind one last time. 0. Harry felt the familiar hook behind his navel as the international portkey activated, whisking him away from Britain, and toward a future entirely of his own choosing. In the headmaster's office at Hogwarts, a dozen delicate silver instruments on Dumbledore's desk suddenly began to spin, whistle, and emit colorful smoke. The ancient wizard looked up from his paperwork and smiled, his blue eyes twinkling with quiet satisfaction. Good luck, Harry, he murmured. The game has changed at last. Chapter 2, Parallel Paths. The ancient grimoire in front of Harry pulsed with a faint blue light as he traced the complex runic sequence with his wand. 6 months of intensive study had transformed his understanding of magic. Gone were the rigid categories of Hogwarts, charms, transfiguration, defense. Here in Prague, magic was taught as an interconnected web of energy, intention, and ancient knowledge. Again, instructed Madame Kostka, her accent thick but her expectations crystal clear. Your intent wavers at the third junction. Harry sighed but repeated the sequence, focusing his magic more precisely at the troublesome third transition. This time, the runes glowed gold instead of blue, and the grimoire's pages began turning of their own accord, stopping at a detailed illustration of a protective dome extending from a central wardstone. Better, Madame Kostka said, actually allowing a small smile to crack her typically stern expression. You learn quickly for an Englishman. Thank you, Harry replied in passable Czech. Language potions had been his first discovery upon arriving in continental Europe. Why struggle with translation charms when a monthly dose of linguarum elixir gave you functional fluency? That is enough for today. The elderly witch closed the grimoire with a wave of her gnarled hand. Tomorrow we begin practical application. Prepare the eastern garden at dawn. After Madame Kostka left, Harry rolled his shoulders to release the tension from hours of precision wand work. His small apartment above the ancient bookshop in Prague's hidden magical quarter had become home these past months. The freedom to study what he wanted, when he wanted, had accelerated his magical growth beyond anything Hogwarts could have offered. He checked his watch, a replacement for the one ruined in the Triwizard Tournament, this one with multiple dials showing time in various locations. According to the Silver Hand, Hermione would be arriving in just under 3 hours. After months of letters and careful planning, she was finally joining him. Harry moved to the kitchen area and started preparing dinner, doing it the Muggle way rather than with magic. Some habits from Privet Drive had proven useful in his new life, and cooking was oddly relaxing after intense magical study. A tap at the window interrupted his chopping. A sleek black owl with intelligent yellow eyes waited on the sill, a small scroll attached to its leg. Harry recognized it immediately as Kareth, one of the Prague Ministry's official messengers. Hello again, Harry said, offering the bird a piece of chicken as he untied the scroll. What news today? The message was brief but significant. Mr. Black, international port key arrival from Switzerland confirmed for this evening. Customs clearance arranged as requested. Subject will be escorted to your location by 8 p.m. Regards, Undersecretary Novak, Department of Magical Transit. Harry smiled at the use of his pseudonym. James Black, simple, unmemorable, and effective. The Swiss connection was part of their security measures. Hermione had traveled first to Geneva, stayed 3 days establishing a paper trail, then would port key to Prague, making her movements harder to track. They couldn't be too careful, especially with recent news from Britain. Harry moved to his study and unlocked the enchanted cabinet where he kept his most sensitive communications. Inside was a stack of letters from various sources, Gringotts intelligence reports, Dumbledore's cryptic updates, and most valuable, the charmed parchment he used to communicate with Ron. Their friendship had been strained by Harry's departure, but after 2 months of silence, Ron had finally responded to Harry's letters. Their correspondence was cautious at first, then increasingly urgent as the situation in Britain deteriorated. Harry unfolded Ron's most recent letter, sent 3 days ago. Situation worse. M took control of Prophet yesterday. Scrimgeour, resigned. Everyone knows what that really means. D says stay where you are, whatever happens. N leading student resistance at H, twins providing supplies. G injured last week but recovering. No word from L since Yule. Strange things happening with you-know-who. Fits of uncontrollable magic reported by reliable source. Makes him more dangerous, not less. Mum worried but safe at you-know-where. Dad under surveillance at work. Something big coming. Can feel it. Hope H's research has answers. Be safe. The letter confirmed what Dumbledore's last message had suggested. Voldemort was slowly taking control of Wizarding Britain, but something was interfering with his magic. The protective enchantments Dumbledore had described were apparently beginning to manifest. Harry placed the letter back in the cabinet, his mind turning to the latest intelligence from Gringotts. According to their sources, Voldemort had been scouring ancient texts for information about Potter family magic, becoming increasingly obsessed with finding Harry. 3 separate tracking rituals had failed spectacularly, the last one reportedly backfiring and killing 2 Death Eaters in the process. The protective magic was working, but it wasn't enough. Britain was still falling piece by piece. Harry returned to preparing dinner, his thoughts now on Hermione and the crucial research she was bringing. If her theories were correct, there might be a way to accelerate the protective enchantments and end Voldemort's reign before more lives were lost. For someone who had left Britain to escape the fight against Voldemort, Harry found himself more involved than ever, just on his own terms. The knock at Harry's door came precisely at 8 p.m. He checked the security ward. It showed 2 magical signatures, one familiar and one unknown. "Who's there?" he called, wand ready despite expecting visitors. "Someone who appreciates your ridiculous Quidditch skills," came Hermione's voice, using their agreed-upon code. Harry grinned and opened the door. Hermione stood there looking tired but pleased, her hair now cut short in a practical bob. Beside her was a stern-looking Czech official in the dark blue robes of the Ministry's Security Division. "Mr. Black," the official said formally, "your guest has been cleared through customs and verified as declared. Please sign here to accept responsibility for her visit." Harry signed the magical document, which flashed gold before rolling itself up and disappearing with a pop. "Thank you for the escort," Harry said, handing the man a few gold coins. The official nodded and disappeared with a crack of apparition. The moment he was gone, Hermione launched herself into Harry's arms, hugging him fiercely. "I can't believe I'm finally here." She pulled back to examine him. "You look different." "Good different or bad different?" "Just different. More relaxed, I think." "And your hair?" She gestured to his longer, neatly tied back hair that helped disguise his famous appearance. "Practical for potion work," Harry explained, ushering her inside. "And less recognizable." Once inside, Harry engaged the privacy wards with a complex wand movement that would have been beyond his abilities 6 months ago. The apartment shimmered briefly as layers of protection activated. "Impressive," Hermione noted, watching the magic settle. "Your wand work has improved. Madame Kostka doesn't accept anything less than perfect form. She makes McGonagall look lenient." Harry took Hermione's bag. "Hungry?" "I've made dinner." "Starving." The Swiss portkey official held me up for ages checking my paperwork. "I think they're being extra cautious with British travelers these days." Over dinner, a hearty goulash Harry had learned from his downstairs neighbor, they caught up on the less sensitive aspects of their lives. Hermione described her cover story, an educational sabbatical to study European magical traditions, her parents' cautious support, and the complicated process of withdrawing from Hogwarts without raising alarms. "McGonagall knew I was lying," Hermione admitted, "but I think she also understood. She gave me this extensive independent study curriculum and said she expects regular essays regardless of where I'm expanding my educational horizons." "That sounds like her." Harry smiled. "How was Ron when you left?" Hermione's expression grew serious. "Angry on the surface, worried underneath. The DA has basically become a real resistance movement under Neville's leadership, and Ron's his right hand. I've never seen Neville so commanding. It's like he's a completely different person." "And the professors?" "Divided. Some are clearly resisting Voldemort's influence, others keeping their heads down. Snape is." She hesitated. "It's complicated. Dumbledore trusts him completely, but he's walking a dangerous line. The Slytherins are watching him constantly. And Dumbledore himself? Rarely at the school anymore. The order is in crisis mode since Scrimgeour disappeared. The new minister, Thickness, is clearly under the Imperius curse. Hermione took a sip of water. But that's not the most important news. I found something, Harry. Something big about the protective magic. Harry leaned forward. Tell me. Not yet. We need somewhere more secure than even this apartment. The information is that sensitive. We can go to the chalet tomorrow, Harry suggested. It has protections even Dumbledore was impressed by. Perfect. Hermione looked around the apartment. So this is where the famous Harry Potter has been hiding. It's very, The space was indeed distinctly Harry's now, books on magical theory sharing shelf space with Quidditch magazines, a practice snitch hovering in one corner, and walls covered with maps tracking magical events across Europe. No photos or personal items were visible, a security precaution. It's not much, but it's the first place that's ever been truly mine. Harry cleared their plates with a casual wave of his wand. Want the tour? It won't take long. After showing Hermione around the compact apartment and setting up the guest room, they moved to Harry's study. With the door closed and additional privacy charms in place, they could finally speak more freely. Show me what you've learned these past months, Hermione said, gesturing to the maps and notes covering the walls. Harry pointed to the largest map, where glowing dots in various colors marked locations across Europe. Red shows confirmed Death Eater activity outside Britain. Blue shows possible sightings of Voldemort himself. Green marks protective magic activation points. There are a lot of green dots in unexpected places, Hermione observed. That's what's interesting. The protective magic isn't just activating in Britain, it's manifesting anywhere with historical connections to the Potter family. Harry tapped a bright green dot in southern France. This vineyard was owned by my great-great-grandfather. Last month, a group of Death Eaters tried to establish a safe house there and were violently ejected by the property itself. The vines apparently came to life and threw them out. Fascinating. That aligns with my research. Hermione studied the pattern of dots. The magic is spreading outward, creating a network of protected locations. But it's not enough. Harry's voice hardened. Britain is still falling. People are still dying while I'm safe in Prague studying ancient runes. That's why my research is so important. Hermione placed a hand on his arm. We can accelerate the process, Harry. But it requires something significant. How significant? Blood ritual significant. Harry stared at her. Dark magic. Not dark, old. There's a difference. Hermione's expression was earnest. Magic wasn't classified as dark or light originally. Those are modern, somewhat arbitrary distinctions. Blood magic gets labeled dark because it's powerful and can be misused, but the intent matters. And what exactly would this ritual do? Strengthen and accelerate the protective enchantments already activated by your voluntary exile. Instead of taking years to fully manifest, we could complete the process in weeks. Harry ran a hand through his hair, a habit when troubled. And this requires my blood? Freely given blood of the last Potter, combined with earth from each ancestral property, performed at a place of magical convergence. Hermione bit her lip. It's complex, and not without risk. But I've checked and double-checked the research. Where did you even find this information? It doesn't sound like something in the Hogwarts library. It wasn't. Hermione looked slightly guilty. Remember when Dumbledore came to witness our unbreakable vow? While you were gathering supplies, I may have borrowed something from his pocket. You pickpocket Dumbledore? Harry was torn between shock and admiration. It was a moment of inspiration. And technically, I summoned it wandlessly while he was distracted. Hermione reached into her bag and pulled out a tiny, ancient-looking book no larger than a matchbox. It was shrunk, of course. When I enlarged it, I discovered it was a journal belonging to Godric Gryffindor himself, documenting protective magic used by the founders to secure Hogwarts and their family lands. Harry whistled softly. And Dumbledore just happened to be carrying this around? I think he wanted me to take it, Hermione admitted. He kept touching his pocket and glancing at me throughout the conversation. You know how he operates, never directly giving information, but making it available to those who show initiative. That does sound like him. Harry shook his head. So this ritual, how dangerous is it really? The magic itself isn't dangerous to the caster if done correctly. The risk comes from the attention it might attract. A ritual this powerful creates magical ripples that sensitive wizards can detect. Like Voldemort. Exactly. We'd need to time it perfectly, when he's distracted or weakened. And we'd need a location with natural protections to mask the magical signature. Harry thought for a moment. The Swiss chalet sits on a convergence of ley lines. My grandfather specifically chose the location for its magical properties. That could work. Hermione yawned suddenly, the exhaustion of international travel catching up with her. Sorry. We should continue this tomorrow after I've rested. Of course. Harry stood. We'll head to Switzerland in the morning. It's more secure there anyway. As Hermione headed to the guest room, Harry returned to the study, his mind racing with possibilities. A ritual to accelerate the protective magic could save countless lives in Britain. But it would also mean fully committing to this path, accepting his role in fighting Voldemort, just not in the way everyone had expected. Different path, same destination, he murmured to himself. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd left Britain to escape his destiny as Voldemort's prophesied opponent, only to discover a different, perhaps more effective way to fulfill that very role. The Swiss chalet exceeded Hermione's expectations. Nestled high in the Alps, its traditional exterior concealed a magically expanded interior filled with Potter family treasures, an extensive library, and magical artifacts from around the world. Your grandfather was quite the collector, Hermione observed as they toured the main floor. These grimoires alone are worth a fortune. Apparently he was obsessed with protective magic. According to my dad's journal, he predicted another rise of dark magic in Britain and wanted to ensure the family had somewhere safe to retreat to. Harry led Hermione to what appeared to be an ordinary stone wall in the study. He pressed his ringed hand against a particular stone, and the wall dissolved to reveal a hidden chamber. This is what I wanted to show you, he said, ushering her inside. My grandfather's ritual room. The circular chamber was lined with shelves of ingredients, astronomical charts, and runic arrays carved directly into the stone walls. In the center was a raised platform with an inlaid pentagram of silver and gold. It's perfect, Hermione breathed, immediately examining the runic sequences. These are protection and amplification runes, meant to contain and direct magical energy. And look, these channels in the floor are designed to carry substances to the central platform. Blood channels, Harry clarified. For rituals exactly like the one you're proposing. Hermione spun around, her eyes bright with excitement. This changes everything, Harry. Your grandfather must have known about the exile protection magic. He built this room specifically to enhance it. There's more. Harry moved to a cabinet and unlocked it with a drop of his blood. Inside were dozens of small containers, each labeled with a location and date. Earth samples from every Potter property, collected by my grandfather and updated by my father. Including some from properties that no longer exist. This is incredible, Hermione said, carefully examining the collection. With these components already prepared, we could perform the ritual as soon as the astrological conditions are right. When would that be? Hermione consulted one of the charts on the wall. If I'm reading this correctly, 3 days from now. The full moon coincides with Mars in ascension, perfect for protective magic with an offensive component. 3 days, Harry repeated. That gives us time to prepare and contact our allies. Allies? You've been recruiting people. Harry smiled slightly. Not exactly recruiting. Let's just say I haven't been idle these past months. Come on, I'll show you. He led her to another part of the chalet, a room dominated by a large circular table with a detailed magical map of Europe embedded in its surface. Around the table were 7 chairs, each marked with a different symbol. "Welcome to what my Swiss contact jokingly calls the war room," Harry said. "Though it's less about war and more about information sharing. These symbols." Hermione traced one that looked like a stylized flame. "They represent different magical governments." "Not governments, individual contacts who've been helping me track Voldemort's movements and influence. People who recognize that his return threatens more than just Britain." Harry touched his wand to the table, and the map illuminated with dozens of glowing markers. The red ones are confirmed Death Eater recruitment activities. Blue shows financial transactions linked to Voldemort supporters. Green indicates resistance efforts. "This is incredible, Harry. You've built an international intelligence network." "More of a concerned citizens group," Harry said with a self-deprecating smile. "Each representative has their own reasons for helping. Karina from the Russian Academic Council lost family in Voldemort's first rise. Jean-Paul's Villa Enclave in France remembers Grindelwald's alliance with Voldemort's predecessors. Takashi's magical security firm in Japan sees business opportunities in developing anti-dark mark wards." Hermione looked at Harry with newfound respect. "You've been building international cooperation while everyone thought you were hiding. I learned from Dumbledore's mistake. One country, one Order of the Phoenix wasn't enough against Voldemort last time. We need broader support." Harry traced a pattern on the table, and several markers began to pulse. "These are the latest reports from Britain. The resistance is growing, but so is Voldemort's control." "And these?" Hermione pointed to several markers that glowed with an odd, flickering light. "Those are the most interesting." Harry's expression grew animated. "Instances where Voldemort's magic has failed or backfired. They're becoming more frequent, just as Dumbledore predicted. The protective magic is working, just too slowly. And our ritual could accelerate all of this." Hermione studied the map thoughtfully. "Have you told your contacts about the ritual?" "Not specifically. I've mentioned researching ways to strengthen the protective magic, but kept the details vague. Trust only goes so far." "Wise." Hermione yawned again, still catching up on sleep after her journey. "I should review the ritual components before I rest. Is there a workspace I can use?" "Use the library. It has everything you'll need." Harry checked his watch. "I have a communication mirror call with Karina in an hour to discuss recent developments in Britain. I'll fill her in on our general plans, without specifics of the ritual, and see what intelligence she can provide about Voldemort's current activities." As Hermione headed to the library, Harry found himself reflecting on how much had changed in 6 months. He'd left Britain feeling defeated, manipulated, and lost. Now he stood at the center of an international effort against Voldemort, with resources and allies his past self could never have imagined. And he'd done it all on his terms, not as a weapon aimed by Dumbledore or a symbol for the wizarding world to rally behind, but as Harry Potter making his own choices. Meanwhile in Britain, Neville Longbottom crouched behind a crumbling wall in Hogsmeade, his wand gripped tightly as spells flashed overhead. Beside him, Ron Weasley was bleeding from a cut on his forehead but still firing hexes with remarkable accuracy at the Death Eaters pursuing them. "We need to split up," Neville whispered, his voice steady despite the danger. "I'll draw them east toward the forest. You get the supplies back to the castle." "No way," Ron shook his head. "We stick together. The medical potions are more important than either of us." Neville's tone left no room for argument. "Madame Pomfrey said there are 12 students who won't last the week without them." Ron wanted to argue but couldn't fault Neville's logic. The Carrow's brutal punishment regime at Hogwarts had left many students severely injured, and Pomfrey's supplies were carefully monitored by the Death Eaters to prevent treatment of discipline cases. "Fine. But take this. Ron handed Neville one of the twins' newest creations, a small silver sphere. Impact activated. Throws up a smoke screen and releases a swarm of conjured bats. Should buy you at least 30 seconds. Neville pocketed the device with a nod of thanks. On 3. 1. 2, 3. They burst from cover in opposite directions. Ron, disillusioned and carrying the shrunken medical supplies, headed toward the secret passage behind Honeydukes. Neville ran in plain sight toward the shrieking shack, immediately drawing spell fire from the Death Eaters. "There's Longbottom." "Get him," a masked figure shouted. Neville ducked and rolled, sending blasting curses at nearby barrels to create confusion. He'd come a long way from the clumsy, forgetful boy of first year. Months of leading the resistance had honed his reflexes and his confidence. As 3 Death Eaters closed in, Neville threw Ron's silver sphere at their feet. It exploded in a cloud of thick purple smoke, from which emerged dozens of screaming bats that attacked the Death Eaters with single-minded fury. Neville didn't waste the opportunity. He sprinted toward the forest, changing direction once out of sight to circle back toward the castle via a route only the DA members knew about. 20 minutes later, he slipped through a concealed entrance near the greenhouses and made his way to the Room of Requirement, which had become the headquarters of the student resistance. Inside, he found Ron had already arrived and was distributing the potions to Hannah Abbott, who had become their de facto medical officer. "Neville." Ginny rushed over, her face showing relief that quickly turned to concern when she saw the burn marks on his robes. "You're hurt." "Just singed." "Nothing serious." Neville looked around the room, taking stock of their members. "Where's Luna?" Ron and Ginny exchanged worried glances. "Still no word," Ginny said softly. "Dad sent a message through the coin network. No one matching her description has shown up in any of the ministry's detainment centers." Neville absorbed this with a grim nod. Luna had disappeared from the Hogwarts Express at Christmas, presumably taken by Death Eaters to pressure her father into stopping his supportive articles about Harry and the Resistance. "We'll find her," Neville said with determination. "Now, report on today's operation." "Successful," Ron confirmed. "All requested potions acquired, plus bonus intel." He handed Neville a folded piece of parchment. "Aberforth overheard something interesting in the Hog's Head. Apparently, you know who is having some sort of magical meltdown." Neville unfolded the note and read quickly. "Uncontrollable magical outbursts, rage fits when spells fail, obsession with finding Potter reaching new heights." He looked up at Ron. "This matches what the Order's been reporting. Something's interfering with his magic." "Yeah, but what?" Ron asked. "Dumbledore hints it's connected to Harry leaving, but never explains how." "Whatever it is, it's making him more desperate and dangerous," Ginny noted, absently touching the scar on her cheek from a recent encounter with Electo Caro. Neville pocketed the note. "We need to get this information to the Order. And we need to step up recruitment in Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw. With Luna gone, we're losing our connection to the younger Ravenclaws." As the others dispersed to their tasks, Ron pulled Neville aside. "Any word from Hermione?" "Nothing direct," Neville said quietly. "But I received a coded message yesterday that she's continuing her studies abroad with a familiar tutor." Ron's expression darkened. "So she really did join him. Can you blame her? Britain isn't safe for Muggleborns anymore. The Registration Commission is sending people to Azkaban for stealing magic." "I don't blame her for leaving," Ron said, his voice tight. "I blame her for not saying goodbye in person." Neville placed a hand on Ron's shoulder. "She did what she thought was right. Just like Harry did. Just like we're all trying to do." "Yeah, well, their right looks a lot different from ours, doesn't it?" Ron shrugged off Neville's hand and walked away to help with inventory. Neville watched him go with a mixture of sympathy and concern. The divide between those who stayed to fight and those who left grew wider every day. He understood both perspectives, the need to stand ground, and the strategic value of fighting from elsewhere. What troubled him was how personal it had become, how friendships were fracturing under the strain. He turned his attention back to the map of Hogwarts spread across their planning table. Tomorrow they would need to create a diversion on the third floor to help a group of threatened Muggleborns escape through the One-Eyed Witch passage. The day after, they had intelligence to gather about the Carrow's next educational decree. One day at a time. That was how they survived now. As Neville plotted patrol routes and escape paths, he couldn't help wondering what Harry was doing abroad, and whether it really was connected to Voldemort's increasing magical instability. He hoped, for all their sakes, that whatever Harry had planned would work soon, before there was nothing left of Hogwarts to save. In the opulent drawing room of Malfoy Manor, now serving as Voldemort's headquarters, a terrified Death Eater knelt before his master. "Forgive me, my lord, but we've lost the trail again." Yaxley kept his head bowed, awaiting the inevitable Cruciatus curse. "The magical signature we detected in Prague disappeared completely. Our sources in the Czech ministry found no record of a wizard matching Potter's description." Instead of the expected torture, an eerie silence fell over the room. Voldemort stood with his back to his followers, gazing out the window with an unnatural stillness. 6 months, he finally said, his voice soft yet carrying easily through the hushed room. 6 months since the boy fled like a coward, and still you bring me nothing but excuses. My lord, we've exhausted every tracking method known to wizard kind, Yaxley ventured. Even the connection through his scar seems to have diminished. Diminished? Voldemort whirled, his reptilian face contorted with rage. As he raised his wand, the chandelier above shattered spontaneously, raining crystal shards on the assembled Death Eaters. This wasn't the first time his magic had manifested without his direct intention, but it was becoming more frequent. Narcissa Malfoy, watching from the corner, exchanged a nervous glance with her husband. These uncontrolled magical outbursts were growing worse, and nobody dared mention them directly. My lord, Severus Snape's measured voice cut through the tension. Perhaps we are approaching this from the wrong direction. Potter's location is but one aspect of the problem. More concerning is the effect his absence appears to be having on magical Britain itself. Voldemort's red eyes fixed on Snape. Explain. The incidents we've discussed, wards failing to yield to your magic, ancient properties rejecting your followers, the magical resistance growing stronger in certain locations, all coincide with Potter's departure. It suggests an old magic at work, perhaps triggered by his voluntary exile. What magic could possibly? Voldemort trailed off, a rare expression of uncertainty crossing his inhuman features. Severus, attend me in the library. The rest of you, continue the search. Focus on magical properties with historical connections to the Potter family. As the Death Eaters dispersed, Bellatrix Lestrange lingered, her fanatical gaze fixed on her master. My lord, allow me to lead the next search personally. I will find the Potter boy and bring him to you. Your loyalty is noted, Bella, Voldemort said dismissively. But your skills are needed here. The ministry requires firmer guidance. Minister Thickness is proving disappointingly weak-willed, even under the Imperius. As you wish, my lord. Bellatrix bowed deeply, concealing her disappointment. Once alone with Snape in the library, Voldemort's composed facade cracked slightly. A nearby bookshelf trembled without apparent cause, several ancient tomes tumbling to the floor. It's getting worse, Severus, Voldemort admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. My magic resists me. As if Britain itself rejects my rightful place as its master. Snape maintained his impassive expression. I've researched extensively, my lord. There are references in ancient texts to protective magic activated by the willing exile of a family with deep magical roots in Britain. The Potters. Indeed. Their lineage traces back to the Founders' era. If the last Potter abandoned Britain voluntarily, especially if he did so to escape you specifically, it could trigger dormant protective enchantments. And these enchantments would manifest as. Voldemort gestured to the trembling shelf. Magical instability for those the land views as threats. Strengthened wards around historically significant locations. Gradual failure of dark magic that conflicts with Britain's oldest protections. Snape's voice remained clinical, detached. The effects would begin subtly but grow exponentially over time. Voldemort's face contorted with rage. Dumbledore. He must have known this would happen. The old fool orchestrated Potter's flight. It seems probable, Snape agreed carefully. The timing is convenient. Is there a counter? A way to break these enchantments? Traditional methods would suggest finding and returning Potter to British soil, preferably unwillingly. Force negates the willing exile that activated the magic. Then we redouble our efforts to locate him. Voldemort paced the length of the library, books rattling on the shelves as he passed. And we accelerate our plans here. If my connection to British magic is deteriorating, we must secure absolute control before it fails completely. My lord, forcing the pace could exacerbate. I did not ask for your caution, Severus. A nearby window cracked in response to Voldemort's anger. Prepare the ritual circle. We will attempt the location spell again, with modifications. The boy cannot hide forever. After Snape departed with a bow, Voldemort remained in the library, surrounded by ancient tomes of dark magic that had served him faithfully for decades. Now, for the first time, he felt uncertainty creeping into his carefully constructed plans. Potter had escaped, not just physically, but in a way that threatened Voldemort's very power. The boy who had been prophesied as his downfall was fulfilling that role without even raising his wand in direct confrontation. It was unexpected. And Lord Voldemort despised the unexpected. The morning of the ritual dawned clear and cold at the Swiss chalet. Harry stood at the window of his bedroom, watching the sun illuminate the snow-covered peaks surrounding the property. Today would change everything, for better or worse. A soft knock at his door preceded Hermione's entrance, already dressed and carrying a thick folder of notes. Ready for final preparations, she asked, her voice betraying both excitement and nervousness. As ready as I'll ever be to perform ancient blood magic, Harry replied with a wry smile. They had spent the past 2 days in intensive preparation, gathering ingredients, studying the ritual mechanics, and practicing the complex incantations. Hermione had practically memorized Gryffindor's journal, while Harry had delved into his father's notes about the chalet's unique magical properties. I've been thinking, Hermione said, settling into a chair by the window. We should contact Dumbledore before we proceed. He might have insights we've missed. Harry considered this. It's risky. Communication could be intercepted. We could use the emergency mirror Gringotts provided. It's supposed to be untraceable. All right, Harry conceded. But we keep it brief and vague. No specific details about the ritual itself. They moved to Harry's study, where the goblin-made mirror was stored in a warded drawer. Harry activated it with a drop of blood and the passphrase, Sanctuary Breach, an emergency code that would alert Dumbledore immediately. Within minutes, the mirror's surface rippled, and Dumbledore's face appeared. He looked tired but alert, his half-moon spectacles sitting slightly askew on his nose. Harry, Miss Granger. This is an unexpected pleasure. I trust you are both well. We are, Harry confirmed. But we needed to consult you about accelerating certain processes. Dumbledore's eyes sharpened with understanding. Ah. I see Miss Granger has been putting her considerable intellect to good use. You found Godric's journal, I presume? Hermione gasped. You did leave it for me to find. Let us say I made sure information found its way to those best equipped to use it wisely. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled briefly before growing serious again. The ritual you're contemplating is powerful and not without risk. We know, Harry said. But things in Britain are deteriorating too quickly. We need to strengthen the protective enchantments now, not months from now. Dumbledore nodded gravely. I cannot disagree. The situation here has become dire. Voldemort's control extends through most magical institutions now, though his hold is increasingly unstable. His magical outbursts have caused significant collateral damage, making him more dangerous in his desperation. That's exactly why we need to act, Hermione insisted. Our research suggests the ritual could fully activate the protective enchantments within days rather than months. Your reasoning is sound, Dumbledore agreed. But timing is crucial. Voldemort is planning something significant for tonight, a ritual of his own, aimed at locating Harry. It has required extensive preparation and will temporarily focus his magic and attention. Harry and Hermione exchanged glances. That could be the distraction we need, Harry said. If he's magically occupied elsewhere, he might not detect our ritual. Precisely my thought, Dumbledore said. However, you should be aware that performing your ritual during his might create unexpected interactions between the two magical workings. What kind of interactions? Hermione asked warily. That's difficult to predict. Magic of this magnitude and antiquity has a certain sentience to it. The protective enchantments might respond more aggressively when directly challenged by Voldemort's location ritual. Harry considered this. Would that be a bad thing? If it makes the protection stronger, yes, but potentially less controlled, Dumbledore cautioned. Old magic often operates on principles we no longer fully understand. The results could extend beyond our expectations or intentions. We'll take that risk, Harry decided. If Voldemort's performing his ritual tonight, so are we. Dumbledore studied him through the mirror. You've changed, Harry. There's a certainty about you now that wasn't there before. 6 months of making my own decisions will do that, Harry replied, not unkindly. Is there anything else we should know before we proceed? Just one thing. Dumbledore leaned closer to the mirror. The ritual requires blood freely given, but the amount matters. Godric's journal probably specifies 7 drops, the magically powerful number. I would suggest using 12 instead. Why 12? Hermione asked. It represents completion, cosmic order. And more practically, it will strengthen the connection to all 12 of the original Potter properties in Britain. Dumbledore's expression grew distant. Your grandfather discovered this modification, Harry. It's how he extended the family protections to the continental properties. How do you know so much about my grandfather's magical research? Harry asked, suddenly suspicious. Fleamont Potter and I were colleagues before I became headmaster. We corresponded extensively on theoretical magic, particularly protective enchantments. Dumbledore's eyes held a hint of sadness. He feared another dark wizard would rise in his lifetime. History proved him right, though not in the way he expected. Harry nodded, filing this information away to explore later. Thank you for the advice, Professor. We should go prepare now. One last thing, Dumbledore said quickly. When the ritual completes, you may experience a temporary magical surge, similar to accidental magic in children but much more powerful. Be somewhere safe, somewhere that can contain such outbursts without damage. We'll take precautions, Hermione promised. Good luck to you both. What you attempt today may well determine the future of Wizarding Britain. Dumbledore's image began to fade. And Harry? Your parents would be extraordinarily proud of the wizard you've become. The mirror surface returned to normal, leaving Harry and Hermione in silence for a moment. 12 drops, Hermione finally said, making a note. That changes the arithmetic equation slightly. I'll need to recalculate the power distribution. And I'll contact our network, Harry added. They should be on alert for unusual magical phenomena tonight. As they separated to complete their preparations, Harry found himself reflecting on Dumbledore's parting words. For years, he had wondered what his parents would think of him, of the choices he'd made. The headmaster's reassurance meant more than he wanted to admit. Tonight, he would use Potter family magic to protect Britain from afar, not as the prophesied weapon Dumbledore had once positioned him to be, but as the last Potter, choosing to wield his inheritance on his own terms. It felt right. It felt like coming home, even while staying away. The ritual chamber looked dramatically different by evening. Hermione had arranged the earth samples from each Potter property in a circle around the central platform, each in a small silver dish labeled with its location. Runic arrays had been carefully drawn in chalk connecting each dish to the center, where a golden bowl waited for Harry's blood. Harry himself sat cross-legged on a cushion, meditating as Hermione had instructed. The ritual required clear intent and focused magic, so he'd spent the past hour emptying his mind of distractions and centering his power. "It's time," Hermione said softly, entering the chamber in ritual robes they'd found in a trunk, clearly left by Harry's grandfather for precisely this purpose. "The moon is reaching its zenith, and Mars is in position." Harry opened his eyes and stood, changing into his own ritual robe, deep crimson with gold embroidery showing the Potter family crest. It felt strange wearing such formal magical attire, but also right somehow, like accepting a part of his heritage he'd never known existed. "Nervous?" Hermione asked as they took their positions. "A bit," Harry admitted. "Not about the ritual itself, but what comes after. If this works, it changes everything. It was always going to change eventually. We're just choosing how." Hermione gave his hand a quick squeeze before stepping back to her position at the edge of the circle. Harry moved to the center platform and drew his wand, not the holly and phoenix feather wand connected to Voldemort, but a new one he'd acquired in Prague. 11 inches of rowan wood with a core of sphinx hair, it specialized in protective magic and had no connection to Voldemort's wand. "Begin the preparation sequence," Hermione instructed, consulting Gryffindor's journal one last time before setting it aside. Harry raised his wand and moved it in a complex pattern while speaking words in ancient Celtic, activating the runic arrays on the walls and floor. The runes began to glow with soft blue light, filling the chamber with a gentle hum of magic. Next, he moved to each earth sample, touching his wand to the soil while speaking the location name and invoking the protection of that place. As he completed each one, the soil began to glow with golden light that traveled along the chalk lines toward the center. "The network is establishing," Hermione confirmed, watching the magical connection strengthen. "Proceed to the final invocation." Harry returned to the center platform and held his hand over the golden bowl. With his new wand, he made a small, painless cut across his palm and allowed exactly 12 drops of blood to fall into the bowl. "I, Harry James Potter, last of the Potter line, freely give my blood to strengthen the ancient protections of my family lands. I call upon the magic of my ancestors to recognize my sacrifice and honor my intent. As I have chosen exile to escape darkness, so let that choice empower the light to reclaim what darkness has stolen." The moment the 12th drop of blood hit the bowl, the entire chamber lit up with blinding golden light. The earth samples rose into the air, swirling around Harry in a tornado of glowing soil, each particle connecting to his blood with thin strands of magic. Harry felt a pulling sensation deep within his core, as if the ritual was drawing on his magic directly. It wasn't painful, but the intensity was overwhelming, making it difficult to remain standing. "Harry!" Hermione called from the edge of the circle, her voice sounding distant. "Your scar." Harry couldn't see himself, but he could feel it, his lightning scar burning cold instead of hot, a sensation he'd never experienced before. It felt as if something was being extracted from it, pulled out by the whirling magic surrounding him. In Malfoy Manor, Voldemort stood in the center of his own ritual circle, surrounded by hooded Death Eaters chanting in unison. Blood from a dozen sacrificed magical creatures formed complex patterns on the floor, and in Voldemort's hand was a silver dagger coated with basilisk venom, the final component needed to pierce the protective magic hiding Harry Potter. Just as he raised the dagger to complete the ritual, Voldemort froze. A cold, foreign magic surged through his connection to Potter, not coming from him to the boy as usual, but flowing in the opposite direction. Before he could react, excruciating pain exploded in his chest. "My lord!" Bellatrix screamed as Voldemort collapsed, the ritual circle around him shattering in a backlash of wild magic that threw the assembled Death Eaters against the walls. Back in the Swiss chalet, Harry felt something snap inside him, like a cord that had been stretched taut suddenly breaking free. The swirling earth and magic around him intensified, becoming a pillar of golden light that shot upward through the ceiling without damaging the structure, extending into the night sky. Similar pillars of light erupted from every Potter property across Europe and Britain simultaneously, visible only to those with magical sight, but unmistakable in their power and purpose. In Hogwarts, Neville Longbottom was leading a group of younger students through a hidden passage when the castle itself seemed to shudder. The stone walls glowed briefly with golden light, and the portraits lining the corridors began cheering and applauding. "What's happening?" a frightened second-year asked. "Something good," Neville replied with certainty he couldn't explain. "Something really good." In the Ministry of Magic, the puppet minister Thickness was signing execution orders for Muggle-born witches and wizards when the magic sustaining his Imperious curse suddenly failed. Across the building, dozens of similarly controlled officials found their minds clearing, looking around in confusion at what they'd been doing. And in Gringotts, deep below the bank in a secure chamber, Ragnarok smiled as a special monitoring crystal turned from red to brilliant gold. The ancient protections were fully activated at last. In the ritual chamber, Harry fell to his knees as the magic reached its peak. The soil samples, having completed their circuit around him, flew back to their dishes but remained glowing with golden light. The blood in the bowl evaporated, rising as crimson mist that spread throughout the chamber before disappearing into the walls themselves. "It's done," Hermione whispered, rushing to Harry's side as the magical light began to fade. "Harry? Are you all right?" Harry looked up at her, his eyes glowing faintly gold in the dimming light. "I felt it break," he said hoarsely. "Something connected to Voldemort, it's gone." Before Hermione could respond, the entire chalet shuddered as a wave of magic radiated outward from the ritual chamber. Every ward, every protection suddenly strengthened to unprecedented levels. The mountains around them seemed to respond as well, a light dusting of snow sliding down the slopes as if the earth itself was adjusting to the new magical reality. "Dumbledore was right," Hermione said, helping Harry to his feet. "Magical surge. We should get you somewhere safe until it stabilizes." They barely made it to the chalet's central living area, which Hermione had prepared with containment charms, before Harry's magic began manifesting visibly around him, golden sparks dancing across his skin, small objects in the room levitating randomly. "It feels different," Harry said wonderingly, watching as a book floated past his head. "My magic, it's like it's been purified somehow. The ritual must have affected you directly, not just the properties." Hermione conjured a diagnostic sphere, a tool she'd learned about from one of Harry's Prague texts. It floated around Harry, changing colors as it analyzed his magical signature. "This is fascinating," she murmured, studying the patterns. "Your magical core is realigning itself. It's almost as if something foreign was removed, and now your natural magic is expanding to fill the space." "Something foreign like a Horcrux?" Harry asked quietly. Hermione's head snapped up. "What did you say?" "I didn't know for certain until now." Harry stared at his hands, where the golden sparks were gradually fading. "But I've suspected since Dumbledore showed me those memories of Tom Riddle. The connection between us was too strong, too unusual to be just from a failed killing curse." "Harry, are you saying you think you were a Horcrux?" "Yes. Unintentional, probably, but that would explain everything, the connection, the shared abilities like Parseltongue, why he couldn't possess me for long at the Ministry. And the ritual somehow destroyed it?" Hermione looked stunned. "I think so. It felt like something breaking free. And now my magic feels cleaner. Entirely my own for the first time." A chime from the communication table interrupted their conversation. Harry moved toward it, his magical surge diminishing enough to allow normal movement. Multiple incoming messages, he noted as several markers on the table began pulsing urgently. "Something's happening across Europe. The first message was from Karina in Russia: Potter protective magic detected across Eastern Europe. Dark artifacts spontaneously neutralizing. Dormant wards activating. What did you do? The second, from Jean-Paul in France: Villa Enclave celebrating. Old alliances with Potter family have reawakened. Magic recognizes blood debt from 1743 event. And most surprisingly, a message from Ragnarok: ritual successful. Gringotts acknowledges ancient compact with House Potter. Bank neutrality suspended regarding enemies of your blood. Defensive measures activated. Harry, Hermione whispered, reading over his shoulder. This is bigger than we expected. It's not just affecting Voldemort, it's reactivating old magical alliances and compacts connected to your family. Compacts I didn't even know existed, Harry said, scanning the messages in amazement. My grandfather's notes mentioned allies, but nothing on this scale. Another chime, this time from the emergency mirror. Harry activated it to find not Dumbledore, but Ron's face looking back at him, his expression a mixture of shock and excitement. Ron. How did you? No time to explain, Ron interrupted. Something massive just happened here. You know who was in the middle of some dark ritual when he suddenly collapsed. Death Eaters are in chaos. The Imperius curses all over the ministry failed simultaneously. And Hogwarts, he broke off, shaking his head in disbelief. Hogwarts is rejecting the Carrows. The castle itself is forcing them out. Neville said the suits of armor just picked them up and threw them out the front gates. It's working, Hermione breathed. The protective magic is purging Britain of Voldemort's influence. Did you do this? Ron demanded. Dumbledore hinted you were working on something, but this is mental, mate. It was a team effort, Harry said, glancing at Hermione. How are you contacting us? This mirror was linked only to Dumbledore. He gave it to me right before, well, you should know. He's gone, Harry. Voldemort sent assassins to Hogwarts when the protection magic started manifesting. Dumbledore held them off long enough for the evacuation, but... Ron's voice broke. He didn't make it. Harry felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath him. Dumbledore, gone. Despite their complicated relationship, the headmaster had been a constant in his life, a fixed point he measured himself against. He knew, Harry said softly. He knew the ritual would work, and that Voldemort would target him in response. That's why he contacted us this morning, to say goodbye. Hermione wiped tears from her eyes. What's happening now, Ron? Is the Order responding? The Order, the DA, and now half the ministry that's suddenly free from Imperius control. It's not over, you know who is still alive, just weakened, but for the first time, it feels like we might actually win this. We need to come back, Harry said suddenly. If Dumbledore is gone, if there's a real fight happening. No. Ron's vehemence surprised them both. Whatever you did from there worked because you're there, not here. Dumbledore explained it to the Order right before the attack. Your voluntary exile is what powers these protections. If you return before you know who is completely defeated, the protection magic would weaken, Hermione finished, understanding dawning. The ritual accelerated it, but your continued exile is what maintains it. Exactly, Ron confirmed. Look, I was angry when you left, Harry. Felt abandoned, if I'm being honest. But now I understand, you're fighting from there as effectively as we are from here. Maybe more so. Harry struggled with conflicting emotions, relief that Ron finally understood, grief for Dumbledore, and frustration at being unable to join the direct fight. There must be more we can do from here. Actually, Hermione said thoughtfully, there might be. The ritual created a network connecting all the Potter properties. We might be able to use that network to channel supportive magic to key locations in Britain. Like magical reinforcements? Ron asked. Something like that. Not offensive magic, the distance is too great, but protective enchantments, healing energy, magical sustenance for fighters. That could make a huge difference, Ron said. The Death Eaters still outnumber us, even with the Ministry defections. We'll start working on it immediately, Harry promised. And Ron, be careful. Tell everyone to be careful. Voldemort may be weakened, but that makes him more dangerous, not less. We know. Listen, I need to go, McGonagall is organizing the defense of Hogwarts. I'll contact you again when I can. After Ron's image faded, Harry and Hermione sat in silence for a moment, processing everything they'd learned. Dumbledore knew, Hermione finally said. He knew the ritual would work, but also that it would make him Voldemort's primary target. And he accepted it. Harry felt a new appreciation for his old headmaster. All these months, I thought he was manipulating me again, but he was setting up the pieces for a different kind of victory, one where I didn't have to die facing Voldemort. The prophecy, Hermione realized. It's being fulfilled, just not how anyone expected. You're vanquishing Voldemort through the ancient magic, not direct confrontation. Harry stood and moved to the window, gazing out at the moonlit Alps. Somewhere across the mountains and the Channel, Britain was in the midst of an uprising against Voldemort, an uprising empowered by magic he had activated from exile. We need to contact everyone in the network, he said decisively. Coordinate an international response. If Britain is finally fighting back in force, they'll need allies. What are you thinking? Hermione asked, already moving to the communication table. Every country represented here has citizens or interests in magical Britain. It's time they offered more than just information. Harry's expression hardened with determination. Voldemort wanted to isolate Britain from international interference. Let's show him exactly how connected the magical world really is. As they began sending messages, activating networks of allies across Europe, Harry felt a sense of purpose stronger than any he'd experienced before. He had left Britain to escape a prophecy, a predestined confrontation that seemed to offer only death. Instead, he had discovered a different path, one that honored his family legacy and might actually save Britain without requiring his sacrifice. Dumbledore's final gift had been freedom, freedom to choose his own way of fighting darkness, even if that meant fighting from afar. And now, with the protective magic fully activated and Voldemort weakened, the true battle for Britain's future had begun. Over the next week, Harry and Hermione barely slept as they coordinated international responses to the rapidly evolving situation in Britain. The chalet became a command center, with the communication table constantly active as reports and requests flowed in from across Europe. The French Magical Assembly has approved emergency support, Hermione announced, reviewing a message from Jean-Paul. Medical teams and cursebreakers will deploy to St. Mungo's within the hour. Good. Tell them to coordinate with Kingsley, he's established a secure arrival point in London. Harry was simultaneously reviewing a map showing Death Eater movements across Britain. The protective magic had forced them out of many traditional strongholds, concentrating their forces in locations with the weakest historical connections to old magical families. Swiss magical law enforcement has intercepted 3 groups of Death Eaters attempting to flee across the Channel, Karina reported via the communication mirror. They're being held under the International Containment of Dark Forces Treaty of 1949. Perfect. Make sure their wands and dark marks are properly documented before interrogation. We need evidence for later tribunals. Harry had learned more about international magical law in the past week than in all his years at Hogwarts. Harry, look at this, Hermione called from the library, where she'd been researching ways to strengthen the network of protective magic. She held up an ancient map that seemed to glow faintly in certain locations. I found this in your grandfather's collection. It shows magical confluences across Britain, places where the protective magic is naturally strongest. How does that help us? If the Order and the DA focus their efforts on pushing Death Eaters toward these locations, the land itself will fight against Voldemort's forces. Harry studied the map. Some of these are near Hogwarts and Hogsmeade. Exactly. I think your ancestors deliberately chose those locations for the wizarding settlements because of these natural magical defenses. Send a copy to McGonagall immediately. And Ron, if you can reach him. As Hermione hurried to duplicate the map, another message arrived, this one directly from Gringotts. Mr. Potter, Dark Lord attempted breach of high-security Potter Vault. Ancient defenses activated. Intruder repelled with significant magical backlash. Collateral damage minimal. 3 goblins awarded combat honors. Recommend immediate review of attached vault inventory. Certain items may be of strategic importance in current conflict. May your gold flow and your enemies tremble. Ragnarok. The attached inventory listed hundreds of items, but one caught Harry's eye immediately. Containment sphere, created by Fleamont Potter, purpose, magical absorption and redirection. Note, experimental. Use with extreme caution. Hermione, Harry called, I think I found something important. After reviewing the inventory together, they contacted Ragnarok for more information about the containment sphere. The goblin's explanation was fascinating. Fleamont Potter had created the device to capture and redirect magical energy, potentially even from killing curses. It was never fully tested, Ragnarok explained via mirror. Your grandfather considered it too dangerous, as it could potentially absorb the caster's magic along with the targeted spell. But it could, theoretically, absorb a killing curse. Hermione asked, her mind clearly racing. Theoretically, yes. Though the magical backlash would be significant. Harry and Hermione exchanged meaningful glances. We need that sphere, Harry decided. Can it be transported safely? With appropriate precautions. I can arrange secure delivery to your location within 2 days. As the goblin worked out the logistics, Harry received an urgent message from Ron. You know who gathering forces at Malfoy Manor. Preparing major offensive. Magic increasingly unstable but devastating when it works. Need any advantage we can get. Harry responded immediately, possible weapon being sent from Gringotts. Hold defensive positions near magical confluences shown on map. Hermione sent. International support incoming. Then, after a moment's hesitation, he added, tell everyone I'm sorry I can't be there in person. But I'm with you in every way that matters. Ron's reply was swift and unexpectedly supportive, we know, mate. You're fighting your way, we're fighting ours. Together we'll end this. Reading those words, Harry felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The guilt of not being physically present for the final confrontation had been gnawing at him, despite knowing intellectually that his exile was crucial to maintaining the protective magic. Harry, Hermione said softly, placing a hand on his arm. We should try to get some rest. Tomorrow will be crucial with the containment sphere coming and Voldemort planning his offensive. Harry nodded, suddenly aware of the exhaustion pulling at him. They had been working almost constantly since the ritual, coordinating international responses and researching ways to strengthen the protective network. You're right. 4 hours, then back to it. 6, Hermione countered firmly. We need to be sharp. As they prepared for their brief rest, a final message arrived, this one from an unexpected source. The parchment appeared directly on the communication table, bearing the Hogwarts seal. Potter, Albus anticipated current circumstances. Left specific instructions regarding Riddle's final vulnerabilities. Nagini remains. The sword knows what to do. Do not return regardless of outcomes. Protection magic must be maintained until confirmation of complete victory. Minerva McGonagall acting headmistress, Nagini, Harry murmured. She must be the last Horcrux. And the sword of Gryffindor can destroy it, Hermione added. But who will wield it? The answer came 2 days later, as they were preparing to send the newly arrived containment sphere to Britain. A message from Neville, brief but triumphant, Snake dead. Sword worked. Final battle tomorrow at dawn. Hogwarts grounds. Everyone in position. Harry and Hermione spent that night making final preparations. The containment sphere, a crystalline orb about the size of a quaffle, inscribed with complex runes, had been carefully packaged with detailed instructions and sent to McGonagall via the Gringotts Secure Transport Network. International magical forces were positioned at strategic points around Britain, ready to prevent Death Eater escapes and provide support to the Order and Freed Ministry forces. The protective magic network had been strengthened as much as possible, with Harry personally connecting his magic to the central ward stone at the chalet. As dawn approached in Britain, Harry and Hermione stood before a specially prepared scrying pool in the chalet's observatory. The magic of the Potter network allowed them limited viewing of connected locations, including portions of the Hogwarts grounds. "It's starting," Hermione whispered as figures appeared in the misty image above the pool. They watched as the defenders of Hogwarts, Order members, DA students, Freed Ministry officials, and even magical creatures from the Forbidden Forest, formed ranks before the castle. Opposite them, Voldemort led his diminished but still dangerous forces across the grounds. Even through the magical viewing, Harry could see that Voldemort looked severely weakened. His normally fluid movements were jerky, his magic visibly unstable as it crackled around him in unpredictable bursts. Yet the Dark Lord advanced with determined rage, his red eyes scanning the defensive line. "Where is Potter?" his high, cold voice carried through the connection. "Send out your supposed champion, or watch your children die first." Minerva McGonagall stepped forward, resplendent in emerald battle robes, the containment sphere held carefully in one hand, her wand in the other. "Harry Potter isn't here, as you well know," she called, her Scottish accent thickened by emotion. "But his magic is all around you, Tom Riddle. Can you feel it? The land itself rejects you." "Lies." Voldemort snarled, but his unease was visible as the very ground beneath his feet seemed to shimmer with golden light, an effect of the protective magic concentrating at the confluence point Harry's grandfather had mapped. The Potter boy fled like a coward. Bellatrix shrieked from Voldemort's side. "He abandoned you all." "Did he?" McGonagall's voice carried a hint of satisfaction. "Or did he choose a different path to victory?" Albus understood, in the end. Potter's voluntary exile activated magic older than Hogwarts itself, magic that has been systematically dismantling your power for months. Voldemort raised his wand, his face contorted with rage. "Enough talk. Avada Kedavra." The green light of the killing curse shot toward McGonagall, but instead of dodging, she raised the containment sphere directly into its path. The crystalline orb absorbed the deadly spell, glowing with blinding emerald light that pulsed and swirled within its confines. "Now, Minerva," called Flitwick from nearby. "The redirection." McGonagall twisted the sphere in a complex pattern and pointed it back toward Voldemort. The contained killing curse energy shot outward, not as a single spell but as a wave of emerald light that washed over the Death Eater forces. Where it touched those with dark marks, their magic seemed to turn inward, their own darkness consuming them from within. Screams erupted as dozens of Death Eaters fell, their magical cores collapsing under the redirected energy. Voldemort alone remained standing, though visibly damaged, a magical shield having partially protected him. But the effort cost him dearly, blood trickled from his eyes and nose, his wand hand trembled violently. "It's not possible," he hissed, his voice weaker. "The boy cannot defeat me from exile." "The prophecy is being fulfilled as we speak," McGonagall interrupted. "Either must die at the hand of the other, Tom." "But, hand doesn't always mean direct combat. Harry's choice, his magic, his family legacy, they are his hand, extended across distance through ancient bonds." As if in response to her words, the ground beneath Voldemort began to glow more intensely. Tendrils of golden light rose from the earth, wrapping around his legs, climbing higher as he struggled against them. "No," he screamed, slashing at the magical bonds with increasingly erratic spells. "I am Lord Voldemort. I cannot be defeated by dirt and ancient tricks." From their viewing position in Switzerland, Harry felt a pull in his magical core. The protective network was drawing on him as its anchor, its last living connection to the Potter bloodline. Without conscious thought, he placed his hand into the scrying pool, somehow knowing it was the right action. The moment his fingers touched the enchanted water, the view expanded dramatically, and the golden light at Hogwarts intensified tenfold. The tendrils around Voldemort surged upward, completely encasing him in a cocoon of ancient magic. "Harry," Hermione gasped, "your eyes." Harry couldn't see himself, but he could feel it, his magic flowing through the network, guided by generations of Potter protective enchantments. When he spoke, his voice emerged both in the chalet and, impossibly, from the golden cocoon at Hogwarts. "Tom Marvolo Riddle," Harry's voice echoed across the grounds, "you sought immortality through murder and soul-splitting. But magic older than your ambition has judged you unworthy of the land you sought to rule." Inside the golden cocoon, Voldemort's form was visible as a dark shadow, thrashing against his confinement. "Potter! Face me directly, you coward." "I chose exile to escape your obsession," Harry continued, his consciousness split between Switzerland and Hogwarts in a way he didn't fully understand. "That choice activated protections you never knew existed, the final gift of my family to magical Britain." The cocoon began to contract, the golden light intensifying. "This is ancient magic, Tom. The kind you've always underestimated. The kind my mother used to protect me as a baby. The kind Dumbledore trusted would eventually defeat you. I cannot die." Voldemort screamed, his voice increasingly desperate. "My power, your power is broken. Your Horcruxes are destroyed. And now, the land itself rejects what remains of your fractured soul." With a final surge of energy that Harry felt drain from his very core, the golden cocoon contracted completely. A terrible scream filled the air, then silence. When the light faded, nothing remained of Lord Voldemort but a fine, dark ash that scattered in the morning breeze. The remaining Death Eaters, seeing their master destroyed, either surrendered or attempted to flee, only to be captured by the waiting international forces. Harry pulled his hand from the scrying pool, collapsing backward into a chair Hermione quickly conjured behind him. The magical connection had taken more from him than he'd expected, leaving him drained but exhilarated. "It's over," he whispered. "He's gone. You did it, Harry." Hermione knelt beside him, tears in her eyes. "Or rather, you and your family's magic did it." "Not just my family," Harry corrected weakly. "Everyone who fought, everyone who resisted. Dumbledore. The Order. The DA. You." "A different path to the same destination," Hermione agreed, echoing his earlier sentiment. As the sun rose fully over the Swiss Alps, messages began pouring in from across the magical world, confirmations of victory, reports of Death Eater surrenders, celebrations breaking out in wizarding communities. The nightmare of Voldemort's reign had finally ended. Yet Harry felt no urge to return to Britain immediately. The voluntary exile that had activated the protective magic had become something more, a conscious choice to forge his own path, to define himself beyond the constraints of prophecy and expectation. "What happens now?" Hermione asked, voicing the question in both their minds. Harry looked out at the majestic mountains surrounding the chalet, then back at the communication table where congratulatory messages continued to arrive from their international network. "Now," he said with growing certainty, "we help rebuild, not just Britain, but the connections between magical communities that should have existed all along. Voldemort isolated Britain by design. That isolation made his rise possible. So we stay here. Continue working through the network. For now." Harry nodded. "Britain needs to heal on its own terms, and I need more time away from being the boy who lived or the chosen one. Here, I'm just Harry. Just Harry who coordinated an international response to a Dark Lord and channeled ancient family magic to help defeat him," Hermione teased gently. "Well, nobody's perfect." Harry smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years. "We'll go back eventually, when it feels right. But not because of a prophecy or anyone's expectations. Because we choose to." As the morning progressed, one final message arrived, this one from Minerva McGonagall herself, Mr. Potter, victory confirmed. Magical Britain stands in your debt, though few will fully understand the nature of your contribution. Albus would be proud of the path you chose. The protection magic remains active, creating a foundation for rebuilding our society with stronger safeguards against dark influences. Your continued absence is noted with understanding rather than criticism. When you choose to return, if you choose to return, know that you will be welcomed not as a savior or symbol, but as a wizard who found his own way to fulfill his destiny. With deepest gratitude, Minerva McGonagall, headmistress, Hogwarts School. Harry read the message aloud to Hermione, then placed it carefully on the desk. If I choose to return, he repeated thoughtfully. It's strange to think that leaving Britain might have been the most important decision I ever made. Sometimes walking away from a fight is the bravest choice, Hermione observed. Especially when it changes the nature of the fight itself. Outside, the Swiss mountains stood majestic and unchanging, a reminder that some things endured beyond the rise and fall of dark wizards, beyond prophecies and expectations. Harry had found not just refuge in these mountains, but a new perspective, one that had ultimately saved magical Britain while preserving his own autonomy. He had refused to fight Voldemort on predetermined terms, choosing exile over martyrdom. In doing so, he had activated magic older and more powerful than prophecy, the protective legacy of generations of Potters who had loved and defended their homeland. Different path. Same destination. But this path had been his choice, and that had made all the difference. Chapter 3, The Unexpected Victory. 1 year after walking away from Britain, Harry stood at the window of his New York apartment, watching snow blanket the city in white silence. America had become his third home after Switzerland and Prague, each move strategically designed to stay ahead of Voldemort's increasingly desperate tracking attempts. The Potter properties had served him well, each one revealing new facets of his family's legacy. The ICW representatives are waiting in the secure conference room, Hermione said, entering with a stack of folders. Her hair was pulled back in a practical bun, her expression all business. Working as Harry's research partner and diplomatic liaison had transformed her from a rule-following student into a confident magical policy expert. Did Abernathy bring the tactical projections? Harry asked, turning from the window. Yes, and the Japanese delegation brought something else, a specialized containment field for magical backlash. Apparently, they've been developing it since Hiroshima to prevent magical catastrophes during conflicts. Harry nodded, grabbing his coat. The International Confederation of Wizards had finally mobilized after months of evidence gathering and diplomatic maneuvering. Voldemort's regime in Britain had crossed too many international lines, kidnapping foreign nationals, attempting to subvert magical governments abroad, and most recently, attacking the French ministry's diplomatic envoy. Any word from our British contacts? Harry asked as they headed downstairs. Ron's latest message arrived by emergency portkey an hour ago. The Resistance is holding 3 secure zones, Hogwarts Room of Requirement, Shell Cottage Perimeter, and surprisingly, Longbottom Manor. Neville's grandmother apparently had some ancient wards even Death Eaters couldn't crack. Harry wasn't surprised. Augusta Longbottom had struck him as formidable since their first meeting. Casualties? Hermione's expression darkened. 17 Order members in the last month alone. Lupin is injured but stable. Professor Flitwick. She trailed off. Dead? Worse. The Carrows captured him during a rescue mission. He's being publicly tortured in Diagon Alley as an example. Harry's jaw tightened. He pushed through the heavy oak doors into the conference room, where 20 witches and wizards from 16 nations looked up at his entrance. Their conversation ceased immediately. "Good morning," Harry said, his voice calm despite the rage simmering beneath. "I understand we're finally ready to authorize direct intervention." Kingsley Shacklebolt, who had escaped Britain 6 months ago to serve as liaison to the international community, stood up. "The vote passed unanimously an hour ago. Operation Avalon is approved for immediate execution." "About damn time," muttered a grizzled American Auror. The timing is critical, added Madame Maxime, who represented both Beauxbatons and the French ministry. Our seers confirm that magical Britain approaches a tipping point. The protective enchantments Mr. Potter activated have created vulnerabilities in Voldemort's power structure, but they're beginning to strain under his countermeasures. Harry moved to the central table where a detailed magical model of Britain glowed with various colored indicators. Red zones, under Voldemort's complete control, dominated the map. Small pockets of blue showed resistant strongholds, while pulsing gold lines indicated the network of Potter protective magic. The initial strike teams will target these 7 locations simultaneously, Kingsley explained, highlighting points on the map. Each is a nexus of Voldemort's power, but also sits on a convergence of ancient ley lines connected to the protective network. My team has prepared runic array packages for each location, Hermione added, distributing slim metal cases to the team leaders. Once activated, they'll amplify the existing protective magic exponentially. A Japanese witch raised her hand. What about magical backlash? Disrupting power nexuses of this magnitude could have catastrophic effects. That's where your containment technology comes in, Harry replied. We're not just destroying these nexus points, we're redirecting their energy into the protective network. Essentially feeding Voldemort's power into the very magic designed to defeat him. Poetic justice, observed an elderly African wizard with an appreciative nod. Your grandfather would approve, Mr. Potter. Harry glanced at the man, surprised. You knew my grandfather? Fleamont and I worked together on the International Potions Registry in the 60s. Brilliant man. He always said the answer to dark magic wasn't more powerful spells, but more intelligent protection. This unexpected connection to his family momentarily threw Harry off balance, but he quickly refocused. The strike teams will need precise timing. Voldemort's sensitivity to magic will alert him the moment the first team moves. We have that covered, said a tall Norwegian witch, activating a complex runic timer in the center of the table. Synchronized countdown enchantments, keyed to astronomical alignment. When Orion's belt reaches perfect alignment tonight, all teams will move simultaneously. As the meeting continued with tactical details, Harry found his thoughts drifting to Dumbledore. The headmaster had died 6 months ago during a massive assault on Hogwarts, but not before sending Harry one final, cryptic message: the true power of prophecy lies not in predestination, but in choice. Harry hadn't fully understood then. Now, after months of studying his family's approach to protective magic and the ancient theories of magical resistance, he grasped what Dumbledore had meant. Prophecies weren't absolute commands of fate, they were possible paths, influenced by the choices of those involved. By choosing exile over confrontation, Harry had changed the nature of the prophecy itself. Neither can live while the other survives didn't necessarily mean a duel to the death. It could mean their magical existences were fundamentally incompatible on British soil. The meeting concluded with each team receiving their final assignments. As people filed out, Hermione pulled Harry aside. There's something else, she said quietly, handing him a sealed parchment bearing the Gringotts seal. This arrived by special courier during the meeting. Harry broke the seal, reading quickly, Mr. Potter, circumstances necessitate disclosure of information previously held in confidence. In the event of Albus Dumbledore's death, he arranged for certain memories to be transferred to Gringotts' custody for your viewing. These memories pertain specifically to the complete prophecy and alternative methods of fulfillment. Given upcoming operations, Goblin diviners suggest immediate review is prudent. A secure pensive awaits your arrival at our New York branch. May your gold flow and your enemies tremble, Ragnarok, director of client inheritance, Gringotts Wizarding Bank. Harry looked up, meeting Hermione's questioning gaze. Dumbledore left me memories about the prophecy. Additional information he didn't share before. Of course he did, Hermione sighed, exasperated but unsurprised. Even from beyond the grave, he's parceling out information on his schedule. I need to see them before tonight. I'll reschedule the tactical review. This could change everything. The Gringotts branch in New York was hidden beneath an unassuming financial building in Wall Street. Harry and Hermione were escorted through labyrinthine tunnels to a secure viewing chamber where a stone pensieve waited, a vial of swirling silver memories beside it. Privacy enchantments are active, the goblin attendant informed them. The memories are keyed to Potter blood only, but may permit your companion's presence at your discretion. After the goblin left, Harry held the vial up to the light. Whatever's in here, Dumbledore thought it was important enough to arrange this elaborate delivery system. Maybe it explains why he seemed so satisfied with your decision to leave Britain, Hermione suggested. That always struck me as strange. Harry uncorked the vial and poured the silvery contents into the pensieve. Only one way to find out. They plunged their faces into the swirling surface together. The familiar sensation of falling through darkness ended as they landed in Dumbledore's office. The headmaster sat behind his desk, looking directly at them as if he could see the viewers of his memory. "Hello, Harry," Memory Dumbledore said with a sad smile. "If you're viewing this, then I have passed beyond the veil, and events have progressed much as I anticipated. First, let me apologize for the fragmentary nature of the information I provided during your years at Hogwarts. An old man's mistake, believing I could control the flow of destiny through the control of information." The scene shifted, showing the dingy room at the Hog's Head where Trelawney had originally delivered the prophecy. "You've heard the prophecy that connected you to Tom Riddle," Dumbledore's voice continued, "but what you don't know is that prophecies are recorded in the Department of Mysteries in their simplest form. The full context, the magical resonance, the additional insights that accompany true prophecy, these are lost in the recording." The memory zoomed in on Trelawney, her eyes rolled back, speaking in that harsh voice Harry remembered from his third year, "The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the seventh month dies." But then the memory showed something Harry hadn't seen before. As Trelawney finished the familiar words, a strange golden light emanated from her, forming patterns in the air that resembled ancient runes. "These symbols," Dumbledore's voice explained, "are what the department fails to capture. They're the magical context of the prophecy, visible only to those trained in the ancient art of prophecy interpretation. I was fortunate, or perhaps unfortunate, to have studied this art in my youth." The scene changed again, showing Dumbledore in a private study, poring over books with the runic pattern sketched on parchment before him. What these symbols revealed was fascinating. The prophecy offered multiple paths to fulfillment, not the single, direct confrontation I initially believed was required. One path, the one I originally planned for, involved a direct magical conflict between you and Tom. But another path, equally valid according to the prophecy's magic, involved voluntary exile of the Chosen One. The memory shifted to show a much younger Dumbledore speaking with an older wizard whose features strongly resembled Harry's. "Your grandfather and I discussed this alternative interpretation decades ago, when rumors of Tom's experiments with immortality first reached us. Fleamont theorized that the Potter family's ancient connections to Britain's magical foundations could be leveraged against a rising dark power. His research into protective magic was partly motivated by this theory." The scene changed again, returning to Dumbledore's office. The headmaster looked tired but resolute. "When you chose to leave Britain, Harry, I recognized the activation of this alternative path. Your voluntary exile, motivated by rejection of the role forced upon you, triggered protective magic beyond anything a directed confrontation could have achieved. The prophecy began fulfilling itself in a way Tom could never anticipate or counter effectively." Dumbledore leaned forward, his blue eyes intense even in memory. "The protection magic requires 3 phases for complete victory. First, the voluntary exile of the Potter heir, which you've already accomplished. Second, the amplification of that protection through ritual, which I believe Miss Granger has helped you achieve. And finally, a coordinated strike against Voldemort's power centers while he is magically vulnerable." The memory showed a map similar to the one from their strategy meeting, with the same 7 nexus points highlighted. These locations must be cleansed simultaneously. The timing is crucial. The protection magic creates temporary vulnerabilities in Voldemort's power, but he constantly works to seal these breaches. You'll have one opportunity to exploit all 7 simultaneously. The scene shifted one last time, returning to Dumbledore sitting quietly behind his desk. There is one final element, Harry, that I've been reluctant to address. For the protection magic to reach its full potential, a Potter must return to British soil at the moment of maximum magical disruption. Not before, that would negate the exile protection. But precisely as the nexus points are disrupted, you must set foot on British ground again, completing the magical circuit. Dumbledore sighed heavily. This places you in grave danger, as Voldemort will sense your return instantly. I cannot in good conscience advise you to take this risk, yet the magical theory is clear, without this final component, the victory may be incomplete. He gazed directly at where Harry stood viewing the memory. Whatever you choose, know this, I have always been proud of you, Harry. Not for fulfilling a prophecy or defeating a dark wizard, but for the choices you've made with courage and compassion, even when facing impossible circumstances. Trust your instincts, they've rarely led you astray. The memory dissolved, and Harry and Hermione found themselves back in the Gringotts viewing chamber, both processing what they'd seen. A return to British soil, Hermione whispered. That changes everything. Harry paced the small room. It makes sense magically. The exile created the protection, but a return would complete the circuit. Like closing an electrical loop. But the danger, Harry. Voldemort would sense you immediately. You'd be walking directly into his awareness with no protection. Maybe not, Harry said slowly, an idea forming. What if I'm not the only Potter who returns? Hermione looked confused. But you're the last Potter. By blood, yes. But magic recognizes other connections. Harry's eyes gleamed with sudden inspiration. My mother's sacrifice created a blood protection. My father's family created a magical legacy of protection. What if we combine those approaches? You're thinking about blood adoption? Hermione asked, catching on quickly. Creating magical Potters to return with you? Not adoption exactly. More like, magical deputies. People who carry a portion of Potter magic temporarily, authorized by me as the family head. Harry began pacing faster. My grandfather's journals mentioned a ritual for extending family protection to allies during the Grindelwald conflicts. We could modify it. Hermione's mind raced through the implications. Multiple Potters returning simultaneously would confuse the magical signature detection. Voldemort wouldn't know which was the real you until it was too late. Exactly. Harry stopped pacing, decision made. We need to update the strike team plan immediately. And identify volunteers willing to accept Potter magic for the mission. That won't be difficult, Hermione said wryly. Half the strike force would volunteer just to be part of the final push. As they hurried from Gringotts, Harry felt a strange sense of completion. The path that had begun with his desperate departure from Britain was now curving back. Not a retreat from his destiny, but a more sophisticated approach to fulfilling it. Dumbledore had understood after all. The old headmaster's seemingly contradictory actions, encouraging Harry's departure while preparing for his eventual return, suddenly made perfect sense. The prophecy would be fulfilled, just not as anyone had originally envisioned. In the room of requirement at Hogwarts, Ron Weasley studied the enchanted coin in his palm, reading Hermione's latest message with increasing disbelief. Bloody hell, he muttered, drawing Neville's attention from across the planning table. News? Neville asked. The once timid boy had transformed into a battle-hardened resistance leader, his face bearing scars from Carrow punishments he'd taken in place of younger students. International strike authorized. Tonight. 7 targets simultaneously. Ron passed the coin to Neville. And Harry's coming back. Ginny, who had been inventorying healing potions nearby, dropped a vial that shattered on the floor. What? Not permanently, Ron clarified, reading further. Some kind of magical necessity. Part of completing the protective magic. Neville studied the encoded message. They want us to create diversionary actions away from these locations. He pointed to a list of coordinates. Pull Death Eater attention elsewhere while the international teams hit their targets. We can do that, Luna said dreamily from her corner, where she'd been painting complex symbols on resistance members' battle robes, protection runes she claimed were more effective when created artistically. Her months in Malfoy Manor's dungeons had somehow made her stranger rather than breaking her spirit. The Nargles have been clustering around the Ministry's lower levels. They always gather before major magical disruptions. Ron had long since stopped questioning Luna's odd statements. Too often, her seemingly nonsensical observations contained grains of surprising truth. We'll need 3 teams, he decided. I'll take Seamus and Dean to create a distraction near Gringotts. Neville, you and Ginny lead a group toward the Ministry's public entrance. Luna, can you and the Patil twins handle something near St. Mungo's? The twins are still recovering from the last mission, Neville reminded him. Hannah and Susan can go with Luna instead. Ron nodded, already mentally calculating timing and resources. A year of leading resistance operations had honed his strategic thinking beyond what even chess had taught him. Everyone needs to be clear, these are distractions only. Hit and fade, no prolonged engagements. The real work happens at the nexus points. And Harry? Ginny asked quietly. Is he really coming back after all this time? Temporarily, Ron repeated, though he wondered himself what would happen after. If they succeeded, if Voldemort was truly defeated, would Harry stay, or return to the international life he'd built? We should inform the Order immediately, Neville said, activating his own communication coin. As the room of requirement burst into coordinated preparation, Ron found himself reflecting on the strange journey that had led here. Harry's departure had initially felt like abandonment. Ron had been angry, hurt, convinced his friend had taken the coward's path. That anger had faded as the protective magic began manifesting, making it clear Harry was fighting in his own way. When Dumbledore explained the full strategy before his death, Ron had finally understood the method behind what had seemed like madness. Now, facing what might be the final confrontation, Ron felt oddly grateful for the path they'd all traveled. Harry's absence had forced others to step up, Neville into leadership, Luna into her strange but effective magical innovations, Ron himself into strategic command. They were stronger for having fought without their prophesied savior. But tonight, Harry would return, not as their savior, but as one piece in a much larger, more complex victory than anyone had originally imagined. Ron picked up his planning map, marked the diversion targets, and began assigning teams. Whatever happened tonight would change the course of magical Britain forever. He intended to make sure they were ready. Harry stood in the center of a secure warehouse on the outskirts of Paris, surrounded by 6 volunteers from the International Strike Force. Each wore battle robes with the Potter crest temporarily emblazoned over their hearts, the magical focus for the ritual they'd just completed. How do you feel? Hermione asked, checking each volunteer's magical signature with a specialized detection wand. Tingly, said Karina, the Russian combat specialist. Like static electricity under my skin. That's the Potter family magic recognizing you, Harry explained. It won't last long, just enough to confuse magical detection systems when we all arrive in Britain simultaneously. Jean-Paul, the French cursebreaker, examined his hands with fascination. I can actually see a golden aura around my fingertips when I focus my magic. That's the protective element, Hermione confirmed. It won't make you invulnerable, but it should help deflect minor hexes and curses. Primary teams report ready at all staging locations, announced Kingsley, entering with a magical clipboard displaying real-time status updates. Runic packages are in place. Resistance diversions are scheduled to begin in exactly 43 minutes. Harry checked his watch, a special creation that synchronized with the astronomical timer governing their operation. That gives us 30 minutes to reach our insertion point. The plan had evolved significantly since viewing Dumbledore's memories. Rather than a single strike force, they now had 7 teams targeting the Nexus points, plus Harry's special team of temporary Potters, who would enter British soil at the critical moment, and the resistance teams creating diversions around the country. Remember, Harry told his team, our job isn't combat. We're there to complete a magical circuit, to reconnect Potter magic to British soil at the exact moment the Nexus points are disrupted. Fight only if absolutely necessary. And the rendezvous point after? Asked Takashi, the Japanese magical security expert. Hogwarts, Harry replied. The Room of Requirement has established a special entrance that will only appear during the operation window. If separated, make your way there individually. Hermione distributed the final equipment, emergency port keys disguised as buttons, communication coins linked to the resistance network, and small vials of golden potion. Phoenix tears, she explained. 1 drop can save you from nearly any injury short of death. Use only in absolute emergency. These are the last from Fawkes before he disappeared after Dumbledore's death. Harry felt a pang at the mention of Fawkes. The Phoenix had appeared briefly at his Swiss chalet 3 days after Dumbledore died, dropping a single feather before vanishing in a flash of flame. That feather now formed the core of a ritual focus Harry carried, not a traditional wand, but a conductor for the specific magic they would perform tonight. 5 minutes to departure, Kingsley announced. Harry took a deep breath, mentally reviewing the complex sequence of events they'd set in motion. The plan balanced on a knife's edge of timing and magical theory. If they succeeded, Voldemort's power would collapse completely. If they failed. He pushed the thought aside. Failure wasn't an option, not with what Britain had suffered this past year. Reports of Voldemort's atrocities had grown steadily worse: public executions, magical experimentation on prisoners, systematic hunting of Muggleborn families. The magical society Harry had once called home was nearly unrecognizable. Ready for transport, announced the Swiss Portkey coordinator, activating a circular platform in the center of the room. International exemption codes accepted by remaining friendly elements in British transport regulation. Entry point confirmed secure. Harry's team took positions on the platform. Hermione gripped his hand tightly. See you at Hogwarts, she said, her voice steady despite her obvious worry. Save me some pumpkin juice, Harry replied with a forced smile, their private code confirming the plan. Hermione would coordinate from the French Ministry's Special Operations Center, managing communications between all teams. Her analytical brilliance had proven more valuable there than in direct combat. The Portkey platform began to glow blue. Harry felt the familiar hook behind his navel as international transit magic engaged. The warehouse disappeared in a blur of color and sound. Seconds later, they materialized in a small clearing in the Forest of Dean, chosen for its isolation and its significance as a place where Harry had once hidden during the Horcrux hunt, creating a personal connection that strengthened the magical circuit they needed to establish. Perimeter secure, reported Takashi after a quick magical scan. No detection wards within range. Harry checked his watch. 27 minutes until synchronization. Let's establish the ritual circle. They worked methodically, each participant taking position at specific points around the clearing. Harry moved to the center, where he placed 7 items from his pouch, birth samples from each Potter property in Britain, collected years ago by his grandfather and preserved for precisely this kind of working. As Harry arranged the samples in a perfect circle, he felt a surge of connection to the land beneath him, British soil recognizing Potter magic after a year of absence. The protective enchantments he'd activated through his exile seemed to stir in response, like sleepers beginning to wake. Primary teams report final approach to targets, Karina announced, monitoring her communication coin. Resistance diversions beginning on schedule. Across Britain, chaos was erupting at strategic locations. In Diagon Alley, a series of Weasley's Wizard Wheezes products modified for combat use filled the shopping district with impenetrable darkness, illusory dragons, and swamps that swallowed Death Eater patrols whole. Near the ministry entrance, Neville's team triggered what appeared to be a mass breakout of magical creatures, complete with convincing illusions of rampaging hippogriffs and enraged centaurs. These distractions served their purpose, pulling Death Eater forces away from the true targets, the 7 magical nexus points Voldemort had corrupted to anchor his power over Britain. At each nexus, international strike teams were carefully disabling outer wards, preparing to place Hermione's specialized runic packages that would disrupt Voldemort's control and redirect the energy into the protective network. 10 minutes to synchronization, Harry announced, feeling tension build in his chest. He hadn't set foot on British soil for a full year. Being back brought conflicting emotions, nostalgia and pain, hope and anxiety. Something's wrong, Jean-Paul said suddenly, his curse-breaker senses alerting him. The magical background is shifting. Detection wards just activated nearby. They found us, Karina confirmed grimly, reading her detection crystal. Multiple apparition signatures approaching from the north. Death Eaters, at least 12. Harry made a split-second decision. Change of plans. We need to separate. The ritual doesn't require us to be physically together, just magically linked and on British soil simultaneously. Scatter pattern Omega, Takashi suggested. Predetermined locations, converging later. Exactly. Everyone take 2 of these. Harry quickly distributed the Earth samples. Wherever you are at synchronization, place these on the ground and activate the runic sequence we practiced. The team nodded understanding, each member grabbing emergency port keys calibrated to different locations across Britain, all significant sites with connections to the protective magic network. Go now, Harry ordered as the first warning flares of incoming attackers lit the night sky. Rendezvous at Hogwarts after completion. One by one, his team disappeared, Karina to Godric's Hollow, Jean-Paul to the ruins of Potter Manor in Wales, Takashi to a hidden magical convergence near Stonehenge, and the others to equally significant locations. Harry remained alone in the clearing, knowing he needed to move but drawn by something unexpected, a magical resonance from the forest itself, calling to him like a forgotten memory. Following this instinct, he rushed deeper into the trees, away from the approaching Death Eaters. The magical signature grew stronger, pulling him towards something that felt strangely familiar. In a small hollow surrounded by ancient oaks, Harry found what was calling him, a standing stone half buried in earth, carved with symbols he recognized from his studies of Potter family magic. This was no coincidence, his grandfather or perhaps ancestors even further back had left this marker. Harry checked his watch. 7 minutes to synchronization. Not enough time to find another location and establish the ritual. This hidden stone would have to be his anchor point. Quickly, he arranged his remaining earth samples around the standing stone, then cut his palm to add blood to the ritual. The moment his blood touched the ancient marker, it began to glow with a soft golden light, the carved symbols illuminating one by one. Stupefy. A red jet of light shot past Harry's head, missing by inches. Death Eaters had found him. Harry ducked behind the stone, casting shield charms in a dome around his ritual space. He couldn't afford disruption now, not with minutes remaining before the critical moment. Potter, a familiar voice called. The Dark Lord will reward me beyond all others for capturing you. Bellatrix Lestrange emerged from between the trees, her face gaunt but her eyes burning with fanatical fervor. Behind her, masked Death Eaters spread out in a semicircle. You're too late, Bellatrix, Harry called back, checking his watch. 5 minutes. It's already begun. What has begun? She demanded, sending a cutting curse that splashed harmlessly against his shield. Your death. Your final failure. Your precious order is falling even now. Harry didn't bother responding, focusing instead on maintaining his shield while simultaneously preparing the ritual components. Each earth sample needed precise positioning and a specific runic activation sequence. Bellatrix grew increasingly frantic as her spells failed to penetrate Harry's defenses. Come out and face me, Potter. Or are you still running away, like the coward who abandoned Britain? I never abandoned Britain, Harry replied calmly, completing another runic sequence. 3 minutes remaining. I just found a better way to fight. A barrage of spells from the assembled Death Eaters hammered his shield, causing it to flicker dangerously. Harry knew it wouldn't hold much longer, but he only needed to maintain it until synchronization. 2 minutes. The standing stone was now pulsing with golden light, responding to the activated earth samples and Harry's blood. He could feel the protective magic stirring more strongly, ripples of power washing through the forest. He comes. Bellatrix suddenly screamed, clutching her arm where the dark mark burned black. The Dark Lord himself comes for you, Potter. 1 minute. Harry completed the final runic sequence, the circle of earth samples now fully activated. The forest around them grew unnaturally still, as if the very air was holding its breath in anticipation. A crack of apparition split the night, and a tall, skeletal figure materialized beyond the Death Eater line. Voldemort had arrived, his snake-like face contorted with rage and triumph. Harry Potter, he hissed, red eyes gleaming in the darkness. At last you return to die. 30 seconds. Harry stood tall behind his faltering shield, facing his nemesis across the clearing. Hello, Tom. Right on time. Voldemort raised his wand, the killing curse forming on his lips as Harry's watch began to chime the synchronization countdown. 10 seconds. 9. 8. Your pathetic rituals cannot save you, Voldemort snarled, advancing through his own followers, who scrambled to clear a path. I have conquered death itself. I have mastered magic you cannot comprehend. 5 seconds. 4. 3. You never did understand the oldest magic, Harry replied. The kind based on choices and sacrifice. 2. 1. Avada, 0. Across Britain, 7 international teams activated Hermione's runic packages simultaneously. At 7 corrupted nexus points, Voldemort's dark anchors were suddenly disrupted, their energy forcibly redirected. At the same moment, 7 individuals carrying temporary Potter family magic completed their rituals on British soil, closing a magical circuit that had remained open since Harry's departure a year ago. In the Forest of Dean, the standing stone erupted with blinding golden light just as Voldemort's killing curse left his wand. The spell struck Harry's shield and simply, dissolved, absorbed into the wave of protective magic now radiating outward. The earth beneath them began to tremble. Trees swayed without wind. The Death Eaters stumbled, some falling to their knees as the very land seemed to reject their presence. Voldemort alone remained standing, his face a mask of confusion and growing horror as his magic failed to respond properly. What have you done? He demanded, casting another spell that fizzled into nothingness before even leaving his wand. I fulfilled the prophecy, Harry answered simply. Just not the way you expected. The protective magic continued to build, golden light spreading through the forest like dawn breaking. Where it touched Death Eaters, they cried out in pain, the dark marks on their arms burning with cold fire as the connection to Voldemort was forcibly severed. Bellatrix crawled toward her master, blood streaming from her eyes and nose as the magic attacked the dark bonds that tied her to Voldemort. My lord! Help us! But Voldemort himself was struggling, his carefully constructed magical body beginning to destabilize as the protection magic identified him as the primary threat to Britain's magical integrity. This isn't possible, he rasped, his voice losing its supernatural resonance. The prophecy spoke of a direct confrontation. Power the Dark Lord knows not. The power was always choice, Tom, Harry said, stepping out from behind the stone as his shield became unnecessary. The protection magic surrounded him like a golden aura, recognizing him as its rightful wielder. My choice to walk away changed everything. My choice to return completes it. Around Britain, similar scenes were unfolding. At each nexus point, the corrupted magic Voldemort had used to control the country was being systematically dismantled and repurposed. The international teams reported success after success as ancient protections dormant for centuries reactivated. In Hogwarts, the castle itself seemed to come alive, suits of armor marching to defend students, staircases refusing to carry Death Eaters, doors vanishing when enemies approached. The room of requirement expanded impossibly, creating a sanctuary that Death Eater magic could not detect or penetrate. At the ministry, the magical foundations began rejecting those with dark marks. Fireplaces expelled them, elevators trapped them, magical documents incinerated in their hands. The corruption that had taken root in Britain's magical government was being forcibly excised. In the Forest of Dean, Voldemort made a final, desperate attempt to maintain his power. Raising both hands toward the sky, he began an ancient necromantic chant, calling upon the darkest magic to preserve him. But the words died in his throat as the golden light intensified, now emanating from the ground itself. Grass, trees, stones, everything glowed with the ancient protective magic that recognized Britain's rightful magical citizens and rejected those who sought to corrupt its fundamental nature. Potter family magic, Harry explained, watching dispassionately as Voldemort struggled. Connected to Britain since the founder's time. My exile activated it. My return completes it. The land itself rejects you, Tom. I cannot be defeated by dirt and trees. Voldemort raged, his form beginning to unravel at the edges, magic leaking from him like smoke. I am Lord Voldemort. No, Harry said quietly. You're just Tom Riddle, who never understood that magic isn't just about power. It's about connection. The protective wave reached critical mass, surrounding Voldemort in a cocoon of golden light. Unlike their previous confrontation through the scrying pool, Harry was physically present now, the Potter magic responding directly to his bloodline. Voldemort screamed as his carefully constructed magical form began to dissolve, decades of dark rituals and unnatural extensions undone in moments. The Horcruxes were gone, the magical anchors destroyed, and now his very existence was being rejected by the land he had sought to dominate. With a final, terrible wail, Voldemort collapsed into a heap of dust and magical residue, the unnatural life force sustaining him finally extinguished. Around the clearing, his followers lay unconscious or crawling weakly away as their dark marks burned away completely. Harry stood alone in the sudden silence, the golden light gradually fading as the protection magic completed its primary purpose. He felt drained but curiously fulfilled, as if a chapter that had been left unfinished was finally complete. His communication coin warmed in his pocket. Pulling it out, he read Hermione's message, all nexus points neutralized. Protective network fully activated. Hogwarts secure. Status? Harry replied simply, Voldemort defeated. Forest of Dean. Coming to rendezvous. He took one last look at the pile of dust that had once been the most feared dark wizard in British history. No dramatic duel, no legendary final combat, just ancient magic doing what it was designed to do, protecting the land from those who would corrupt it. With a soft pop of apparition, Harry left the forest clearing, the standing stone once again dormant but now permanently linked to the fully activated protective network spanning Britain. Hogwarts looked both familiar and strange as Harry approached from the edge of the Forbidden Forest. Battle damage scarred its ancient walls, yet the castle radiated renewed magical strength, the protective enchantments visibly rippling across its surface like heat waves. The main gates recognized him immediately, swinging open without being touched. As Harry walked the path to the entrance, he felt a sensation he hadn't experienced in over a year, the feeling of Hogwarts welcoming him home. In the Great Hall, chaos and celebration mingled. Wounded were being treated along one wall while jubilant resistance members embraced and exchanged stories. International strike team members compared notes with Order of the Phoenix fighters. House elves popped in and out, delivering food and medicine. Harry paused in the doorway, suddenly self-conscious. How would they receive him after his long absence? Would they understand why he had left, or still see it as abandonment? Before he could worry further, a familiar voice called his name. Ron pushed through the crowd, his tall frame easy to spot despite the bustle. His face bore new scars, and he moved with a slight limp, but his smile was as bright as ever. Harry. He engulfed Harry in a crushing hug, thumping his back enthusiastically. You bloody did it. We all did it, Harry corrected, returning the hug with equal force. How are our teams? All accounted for. Your temporary Potters arrived about 10 minutes ago, quite a sight, all of them glowing gold like Christmas decorations. Ron pulled back, examining Harry with a critical eye. You look different. More. I dunno, settled. A year of making my own decisions will do that, Harry replied with a small smile. Harry Potter. McGonagall's voice cut through the noise as the acting headmistress approached, her normally severe expression softened with relief. Welcome back to Hogwarts. Temporarily, I understand. That depends, Harry said carefully. Is it really over? Completely. The magical monitoring devices I inherited from Albus confirm it, McGonagall nodded. Voldemort is truly gone this time. The Death Eaters are either in custody or fleeing with their magic severely depleted. The Ministry is reorganizing under Kingsley's temporary leadership. Then my exile has served its purpose, Harry concluded. The protection magic is fully activated and self-sustaining now. It doesn't require my absence to maintain it. Indeed. Quite remarkable magic, Mr. Potter. Your grandfather would have been most impressed. More familiar faces approached, Neville with a commanding presence that still surprised Harry, Luna wearing radish earrings incongruously with battle robes, Ginny moving with the fluid grace of someone who had become dangerous through necessity rather than choice. Their greetings were warm but complicated, happiness at the victory mixed with unspoken questions about Harry's year away and his future intentions. No one asked directly if he was staying, but the question hung in the air. Where's Hermione? Harry asked, noticing her absence. Coordinating with the French ministry, Ron explained. She's been managing international communications throughout the operation. Should be here soon. As if summoned by her name, Hermione rushed into the Great Hall, immediately spotting Harry and running to embrace him. It worked, she exclaimed breathlessly. All 7 Nexus points neutralized simultaneously. The protective network is fully operational and self-regulating. The magical signature readings are off the charts. And Voldemort? She asked more quietly. Gone, Harry confirmed. Not just defeated, completely unmade. The protective magic identified him as fundamentally incompatible with Britain's magical nature. Hermione nodded, unsurprised. That aligns perfectly with the theoretical models. The Potter family magic recognized him as an existential threat and responded accordingly. Their technical discussion drew curious looks from others nearby. Harry realized how much had changed, not just Britain, but himself. A year ago, he wouldn't have understood half the magical theory Hermione was referencing. Now it was their common language. McGonagall cleared her throat. I believe an explanation for the broader community would be appropriate, Mr. Potter. Many here understand that your exile and return were somehow crucial to our victory, but few comprehend exactly how. Harry looked around at the gathered faces, friends, classmates, order members, international allies, all watching him expectantly. The old Harry would have been uncomfortable with the attention. Now, he recognized the importance of ensuring everyone understood what had happened and why. Moving to the center of the hall, Harry cast a simple sonorous charm. I owe all of you an explanation, he began, his amplified voice bringing conversations to a halt. A year ago, I left Britain, not to abandon the fight against Voldemort, but to change how that fight happened. Over the next 15 minutes, Harry explained the complex strategy that had unfolded, the ancient Potter family magic, the protective enchantments activated by his voluntary exile, the international coalition that had formed around this alternative approach. What many of you witnessed today wasn't just a military victory, he concluded. It was the culmination of magic that began centuries ago, when the first magical families established protective bonds with Britain itself. My ancestors created safeguards against dark magic that could only be activated under specific circumstances, including the willing exile of the last Potter. So Dumbledore knew all along, someone called out. Not at first, Harry answered honestly. He initially believed in the direct confrontation the prophecy seemed to require. It was only when I made the choice to leave that he recognized the activation of an alternative path. And the prophecy? Neville asked. The one that said you had the power the Dark Lord knows not. Fulfilled, just not as anyone expected. The power wasn't some special spell or magical ability I possessed. It was the ancient protection magic tied to my family line, magic Voldemort never bothered to understand because it didn't serve his vision of domination. Murmurs spread through the crowd as people processed this information. Harry could see some looked relieved, others thoughtful, and a few slightly disappointed, perhaps having expected a more traditional heroic confrontation. The most important lesson, Hermione added, stepping forward to stand beside Harry, is that magical Britain's vulnerability wasn't just about Voldemort's power. It was about isolation. By cutting ourselves off from the international magical community, by believing our problems were uniquely British, we created the conditions for a dark wizard to rise repeatedly. Kingsley nodded in agreement, joining them. Which is why our rebuilding efforts will prioritize international cooperation. The magical borders that have kept Britain isolated for centuries are being reassessed. The International Confederation of Wizards has already offered significant support for reconstruction. The discussion evolved into a broader conversation about the future of magical Britain. Harry gradually stepped back, letting others take the lead. This, too, was different from before. He no longer felt solely responsible for solving every problem or answering every question. As the evening progressed, Harry found himself on the astronomy tower, seeking a quiet moment to process everything that had happened. The stars shone brilliantly over the Scottish Highlands, unchanged despite the momentous events below. Soft footsteps announced Ron and Hermione joining him, the trio standing together in comfortable silence for several minutes before Ron spoke. "So, are you staying?" he asked, the question simple but heavy with meaning. Harry considered carefully before answering. "Not permanently." "Not yet." "Why not?" Ron's voice held curiosity rather than accusation. "Voldemort's gone. The exile protection served its purpose. You could come back to Hogwarts, finish your education, have a normal life." "That's just it," Harry said quietly. "I'm not sure what a normal life looks like for me anymore. This past year changed me. I've built connections across the magical world, started projects that matter to me. I can't just abandon those and pretend the last year didn't happen." "You found something that fulfills you," Hermione observed. "Outside of being the boy who lived or the chosen one." "Exactly. For the first time, I'm just Harry, making my own choices based on what I want, not what a prophecy or magical Britain needs from me." He turned to face his friends directly. "But that doesn't mean I'm abandoning Britain again. I'm thinking more of a divided approach. Time abroad continuing my international work, time here helping rebuild. The best of both worlds," Ron mused. "Can't say I blame you. Especially after seeing those fancy apartments you've been living in." He grinned, referencing the photos Harry had shared during their correspondence. "What about you two?" Harry asked. "After everything that's happened here, do you still see your futures in Britain?" Ron and Hermione exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them that Harry recognized as new, developed during his absence. "I've been offered a position with the Department of Magical Law Enforcement," Ron said. "Specifically rebuilding the Auror program with international training standards. Apparently my strategic innovations during resistance operations impressed some people." "They should be impressed," Harry said sincerely. "From what I heard, your tactical leadership saved countless lives." Ron's ears reddened with the old familiar blush. "Yeah, well. Turns out I'm good at chess for a reason." Seeing the whole board, planning moves ahead, it transferred surprisingly well to resistance fighting. "And I've been approached by both the Department of International Magical Cooperation and the Unspeakables," Hermione added. "My work coordinating with magical governments abroad apparently caught attention." But honestly, I'm considering continuing my education first, perhaps splitting time between magical universities in Britain and abroad. Following my example of international living? Harry teased. Perhaps, Hermione smiled. There's so much magical knowledge beyond Britain's borders that we never learned at Hogwarts. This past year has shown me how limited our educational perspective was. They fell silent again, gazing out over the grounds where the battle had been fought and won. Dawn was approaching, the eastern sky lightening with promises of a new day. It's strange, Harry said eventually. When I left a year ago, I thought I was walking away from the prophecy, refusing the destiny that had been forced on me. But in the end, I fulfilled it anyway, just on my own terms. That might be the most important victory of all, Hermione suggested. Proving that even prophecy can be approached with choice and agency. To choices, Ron said, mimicking raising a toast. Better late than never. To choices, Harry and Hermione echoed. The rebuilding of magical Britain began immediately and progressed with surprising speed. The international cooperation that had achieved victory continued through Reconstruction, with magical governments worldwide offering support, expertise, and resources. Kingsley Shacklebolt was formally confirmed as Minister for Magic in a special election held just 1 month after Voldemort's defeat. His first official act was establishing the International Magical Cooperation Initiative, creating permanent exchange programs between British magical institutions and their counterparts abroad. Hogwarts reopened for a special summer session, allowing students whose education had been disrupted to catch up before the formal academic year resumed in September. McGonagall, now permanently appointed as headmistress, introduced curriculum reforms that incorporated magical practices from around the world. Harry divided his time as planned, 3 weeks abroad continuing his international magical security work, 1 week in Britain helping with specific reconstruction projects. He declined all offers of official positions or honors, preferring to contribute on his own terms rather than becoming a symbol for the new government. The Potter protective magic remained active throughout Britain, though in a less visible form. Sensitive wizards and witches could sometimes perceive it as a subtle golden shimmer in places of magical significance, a permanent safeguard against the rise of similar dark powers in the future. 6 months after Voldemort's defeat, Harry stood in the newly rebuilt Ministry atrium, watching wizards and witches from dozens of countries mingle at the first International Magical Cooperation Conference. The transformation from the isolationist, pure-blood-dominated institution of the past was remarkable. Quite a change, isn't it? Hermione observed, joining him by the magnificent new fountain that depicted magical beings from around the world working together. Gone was the wizard-centric monument of the past. It's like a completely different place, Harry agreed. In every way that matters. Minister Shacklebolt is about to announce the International Magical University Initiative, Hermione said excitedly. Joint campuses in London, Paris, Tokyo, and New York, with students and faculty rotating between all 4. I've been asked to help develop the comparative magical theory curriculum. You'll be brilliant at it, Harry said sincerely. No one understands cross-cultural magical integration better than you. They were joined by Ron, looking uncharacteristically formal in diplomatic robes. His work rebuilding the Auror program had evolved into a broader role coordinating international magical security. The Japanese delegation is particularly interested in your warding techniques, Ron told Harry. Apparently your modifications to their containment fields impressed their Security Council. I just adapted what I learned from my grandfather's notes, Harry said modestly. Their base technology was already extraordinary. This is what victory really looks like, Hermione observed, gesturing to the diverse gathering. Not just defeating a dark wizard, but building something better in the aftermath. Harry nodded, thinking about how differently things might have turned out. If he had stayed in Britain, followed the expected path of direct confrontation with Voldemort, would they have achieved this level of international integration? Or would they have simply returned to the isolated, insular magical community that had allowed problems to fester repeatedly? His departure, which had seemed like abandonment to some, had ultimately forced Britain to look outward for solutions. Sometimes walking away from a problem created space for better approaches to emerge. As Kingsley began his address to the assembled international representatives, Harry slipped away quietly. He had never enjoyed formal gatherings, and his work abroad beckoned. A new protective warding project in Egypt awaited his expertise. Outside the ministry, in the mundane bustle of London streets, Harry paused to look back at the magical government he had once feared and distrusted. Now it represented hope and renewal, integration rather than isolation. His path had been unexpected: voluntary exile instead of prophesied confrontation, international cooperation instead of solitary heroism, strategic coordination instead of dramatic duels. Yet the destination had been reached all the same, perhaps more thoroughly and sustainably than anyone could have predicted. Harry smiled to himself as he walked away, not as the boy who lived or the chosen one, but simply as Harry Potter, a wizard who had found his own way to fulfill his destiny, on his own terms. Behind him, golden protective magic rippled briefly visible across the ministry facade, a reminder of ancient bonds between magical families and the land they called home. The magic recognized its purpose fulfilled, settling into its new role as guardian rather than active defender. Different path. Same destination. But this path had allowed Harry to become not what others needed him to be, but who he truly was, and that made all the difference. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.